Going Home was written by Terri Tyler and John Wills. In the following narrative, a love story. There are 12 stories that are true and belonging to different family members of Terri Tyler or John Wills occurring between 1860 and 2023. Going Home by Terri Tyler and John Wills in the spring of 2023. In the early spring of 2023, I had the pleasure of finally meeting my Facebook friend, Terri Tyler, in person. Terri had been conducting genealogical research on her Missouri family members, and our meeting was set at a small cemetery in Harrison, Missouri, where we shared stories and our passion for history. Terri was staying with her aunt for a few days, and during our conversation, I suggested an impromptu journey to search for my grandmother's gravestone in Hart Cemetery, located in Perryville, Missouri. With an agreement that we'd return before nightfall, we embarked on what we thought would be a straightforward 320-mile afternoon drive. Little did we anticipate the adventure that awaited us on the road from Harrison, Missouri, to Perryville and beyond. Our journey was filled with seemingly endless road construction and unexpected detours that tested our patience. What started as a manageable afternoon drive quickly turned into a challenging ordeal as we navigated through traffic jams and encountered road closures along the way. By midday, we were both eager to reach our destination and put our travel troubles behind us. We decided to refuel with lunch at a Stuckey's restaurant along our route, a place with an interesting connection to my family's history. Over lunch, we exchanged stories and shared laughter, making the best of our situation. Despite our hearty meal, delays continued to plague us, and dusk was approaching as we finally neared Perryville. The moon's ethereal glow cast an enchanting aura on the landscape, adding an element of intrigue to our quest. Nevertheless, our determination remained unwavering, and we set out to locate my grandmother Catherine's gravestone in Hart Cemetery. The night was heavy with the scent of roses and the distant echo of owls in the old oak trees. A silver moon hung low in the sky, casting an ethereal glow over the cemetery. The stars above blinked like distant memories, illuminating the worn paths that crisscrossed through the gravestones of southeastern Missouri. It was a place where the living dared not venture after dark, but for John and Terri, it was their secret sanctuary. Terri's hand slid into John's, her fingers lacing with his as they walked between the rows of weathered tombstones. The soft crunch of gravel beneath their feet was the only sound that disturbed the profound silence of the night. The world beyond the cemetery seemed to fade away, leaving only the two of them and the whispering shadows of the past. "Why did we come here? John will never find her stone this late," Terri asked, her voice barely more than a hushed breath. John squeezed her hand gently, his eyes fixed on the moonlight-dappled ground. "It's peaceful, Terri. Besides, I find solace among the forgotten stories." Terri nodded, her eyes scanning the inscriptions on the gravestones they passed. She had always been drawn to the tales of those who had come before them, and the cemetery was a trove of untold histories. The names and dates etched in stone were like fragments of lives that had once been, now fading into the annals of time. As they wandered deeper into the cemetery, a cool breeze rustled the leaves of the trees, and the old oaks seemed to murmur secrets to one another. Terri shivered, partly from the night's chill and partly from the eerie ambience that enveloped them, but she felt safe with John by her side, his presence a comforting anchor in the midst of the unknown. Along their long drive they had become well acquainted and even enjoyed each other's company. They reached a clearing in the cemetery where a marble angel stood sentinel over a family plot. Its wings seemed to stretch out, embracing both the living and the departed. Terri gazed up at the celestial figure, her heart heavy with a sense of melancholy. Who were they, I wonder? She mused, her gaze lingering on the angel. John followed her gaze and shrugged. Perhaps they were dreamers like us, searching for meaning in the quiet of the night. The couple continued their late-night stroll, pausing occasionally to read the epitaphs of the long-forgotten souls. Each inscription told a different story, a brief glimpse into the lives that had once thrived, loved, and suffered. As they walked, the weight of the past pressed down upon them, filling the night with a bittersweet resonance. Terri stopped before a particularly weathered gravestone, its edges softened by time. She knelt and brushed away some fallen leaves, revealing the name carved into the stone. Catherine Walker Wills, beloved wife of Jacob and mother of Martha, John, Louis, William, and James. She read aloud, her voice trembling. Born 14 May 1830, died 5 March 1859. John joined her, his hand resting on her shoulder. She was so young to die, having died giving birth to my great-grandfather James. Terri nodded, her eyes welling with tears. In that quiet moment, they paid their respects to Catherine Wills, a woman whose life had been cut short by the unforgiving passage of time. The cemetery, with its secrets and stories, had drawn them in once more, reminding them of the fragility and beauty of life. As the silver moon continued its watchful vigil, Terri and John rose to their feet and resumed their midnight stroll, their hands entwined. John turned to Terri and said, "Why don't we write the history of the Tyler family from the time they landed in America up until today?" So begins that journey. Our journey took an unexpected turn when, once again, we stumbled upon a detour that led us down a road under construction, ending in a dead end. John tried to maneuver the car to turn it around, but it slipped down the hillside, leaving us stuck. With no other options, we resigned ourselves to spending the night in the car, hoping for rescue. It wasn't until the following day, around 5 p.m., that a tow truck finally arrived to pull us back up the hill. John, feeling responsible for all the inconvenience Terri had endured, decided to offer her an alternative. He turned to her and asked, "Would you feel comfortable staying at my cousin's hotel, the Drury Inn? It is a nice hotel, and they have hundreds of hotels all over the country, so it is not like a roadside motel like you would have seen alongside highways. It's only 30 highway miles away." Terri hesitated for a moment, considering the offer. She recalled the long and winding journey they had already undertaken to reach Perryville earlier that day, realizing that a nighttime return would be far from ideal. "You know what?" she finally replied with a warm smile. "That sounds like a wonderful idea." I handed Terri my phone, suggesting that she call her aunt it was, and explain the situation. After a brief conversation with her aunt, she turned to me, handed me my phone back, and said, "Let's go, John." I said, "Sure, let me make a phone call and I get that car door for you." As she is seated in John's car, he remains outside talking to someone on his phone. Then John opened the door and apologized for making her wait, saying he wanted to call ahead and make sure they would have 2 rooms, and they did. John asked Terri if she enjoys adventure in her travels, and Terri said, "Well, most of my trips have been a little boring, but I do like to travel." John turns to Terri and says, "Well, maybe tomorrow we might have the opportunity to experience a little mini adventure like we haven't already had one," and John left. Terri looks at John curiously, then said, "I would love an adventure, but not if mean we have sleep in the car all night at the bottom of hill." John drove rather slowly, claiming he didn't want to take a chance on a county highway with a deer jumping out in front of him. We had already been delayed long enough. The 15-minute drive takes John almost 45 minutes before he reaches the Drury Inn. During the drive, they both enjoyed the conversation about their own adventures and places where they had both been, which was just a continuation of the long conversation they had the previous night. John could tell that Terri felt a bit out of her comfort element, saying she was unfamiliar with the town and hotel, of which she never heard of before. She was growing weary from trampling through cemeteries, and her clothes were now soiled from walking in the Hart Cemetery, mostly because the grass and weeds were high and wet from an afternoon rain shower and then sleeping in the car. Upon arriving at the hotel, John parked the car in front of the hotel and ran around to the other side and opened Terry's door. Together they walked into the lobby to get their room keys. "Could you recommend the best restaurant in town?" John asked, though we're both quite famished. We were stuck on a deserted road last night and only had little snacks we had purchased at a stuck to munch on all day. "You're in luck, sir." The clerk flashed with a friendly grin and said that our hotel boasts an excellent restaurant right here on the premises. "I must say, sir, its only rival is the Los Antiquaries in Paris, France." "Oh, really?" says John. "I've been there, and we'll see which one is better. Please make dinner reservations for 2. "The concierge says, sir, we only have one opening, and that will be at 8 o'clock this evening." "That will be fine, we'll take it," John says. John turns to Terri, whose eyes have expanded as she says, "I don't have anything to wear this evening. The C's clothes are covered in dirt and sweat from tramping in the woods all day." John pulls a red rose out of a vase from the hotel flowers, gives it to her, and says, "Terri, just wear this flower in your hair along with a smile, and no one will ever notice your clothes." She wants to object, but John just puts his finger to his lips, indicating silence. When they reached the room, which was across the aisle from each other, Terri opened her door and walked in as John said, "I'll meet you in the restaurant at 8, and please don't forget to wear the rose in your hair so I'll be able to find you." She laughs and says, "You're crazy, John," and shuts the door. No sooner had Terri closed her door, and maybe 5 minutes later, a gentle knock echoed through the room. She opened the door to be greeted by 2 impeccably dressed salesladies from Neiman Marcus, pushing a wardrobe cart brimming with clothing selections. Terri's initial reaction was one of disbelief, almost thinking it was some elaborate prank, but the sincerity in the ladies' expressions quickly dispelled that notion. One of them kindly offered to help with her makeup and her hair, saying they had to hurry a little so that she would be ready a little before 8. Terri glanced at the wardrobe options, and then back at the ladies, a mix of surprise and gratitude in her eyes. She responded with a heartfelt agreement. "You're right. A shower would be wonderful, and these clothes would be much better than what I wore for our cemetery visit and overnight stay stranded on a country road," as she laughs and says thank you. With a nod and a warm smile, Terri accepted their thoughtful gesture. She made her way to the bathroom, and the sound of running water soon filled the room. After a refreshing shower, 2 hours later, Terri emerged transformed, She looked in the mirror as she reached the door and said, "Oh my God," her face lit up with newfound confidence and comfort. The dress they had provided complemented her perfectly, and she looked absolutely radiant. A beautiful lady with her golden and cascading hair was a vision of elegance as she graced the room in her exquisite evening gown. Her long, wavy locks shimmered like strands of spun gold, catching the soft ambient light and reflecting it with a mesmerizing radiance. Her evening gown, a work of art, clung to her graceful form with a gentle embrace. The fabric, a rich shade of midnight blue, hugged her curves in all the right places, highlighting her slender waist and the gentle swell of her hips. The gown's bodice was adorned with intricate lace and delicate beading, which sparkled like a constellation of stars against the dark fabric. The neckline of the gown dipped gracefully, revealing a hint of her collarbone and the graceful curve of her neck. Her bare shoulders added a touch of sensuality to the ensemble, while the gown's back plunged into a daring V shape, drawing the eye to the elegant sweep of her spine. As she moved down the hall from her room, her gown flowed like liquid silk, its hem brushing the floor with each step, leaving a trail of stardust in her wake. Her presence was a captivating blend of poise and allure, a true embodiment of timeless beauty. With grace and elegance, Terri made her way to the elevator, her footsteps barely making a sound on the plush carpet. She entered the elevator and pressed a button for her destination, her demeanor exuding poise and charm. Upon arriving at the hotel's opulent dining room, she drew the attention of those present. Heads turned as they couldn't help but be captivated by her beauty and grace. Terri left an indelible impression on everyone in the room with her air of sophistication and allure. John sat at the bar, initially looking away as Terri made her grand entrance. However, it was impossible to ignore the whispers and intrigued glances of other patrons as they admired the enchanting woman in their midst. Slowly, John turned his gaze towards her, a warm smile gracing his lips as he realized the attention she commanded. His heart skipped a beat, and he couldn't help but feel a surge of pride knowing that she was the center of attraction. Approaching Terri with confidence, John extended his hand to her. He speaks with sincerity. "I had plans for dinner, but at this moment, I find myself drawn to you in a way I couldn't have anticipated." His smile held a hint of playfulness. Then, using a deep Southern gentleman accent, he said, "Miss Scarlett, you put all other Southern belles into envy. So, I must ask, do you have any plans for the rest of your life?" Softly using her Southern accent, she said, "Thank you, Mr. Butler," lifting her hand to his where he would guide her to their table. His words lingered in the air, a question that invited Terri to embark on an exciting journey together. Dinner was an exquisite affair, set in the elegant ambience of the hotel's restaurant. Soft, warm lighting cast a gentle glow on each table, creating an intimate atmosphere that was perfect for their evening together. The tables were adorned with crisp, white linens and polished silverware, adding a touch of sophistication to the scene. John and Terri were seated across from each other, their eyes locked in conversation even before the first course arrived. The menu offered a tantalizing array of options, from delectable appetizers to sumptuous main courses and decadent desserts. For starters, they chose a shared plate of brochettes topped with ripe tomatoes, fresh basil, and a drizzle of balsamic glaze. The flavors burst with each bite, a delightful introduction to the culinary journey that lay ahead. Terri reaches across the table, places her hand upon John's, and says, "Thank you, this is a beautiful gown, and I would never have pictured myself ever wearing something so beautiful. I feel like Julia Roberts in Pretty Woman, and I've just gone shopping." "Thank you, John." As they savored their appetizers, their conversation flowed effortlessly. They shared stories of their travels, recounted funny anecdotes, and exchanged dreams and aspirations. The evening air was filled with laughter and the joy of getting to know one another on a deeper level. For the main course, Terri opted for a succulent grilled salmon, accompanied by a medley of seasonal vegetables and a lemon dill sauce that danced on her taste buds. John, on the other hand, chose a perfectly cooked New York strip steak, its juices seeping into a bed of garlic mashed potatoes and tender asparagus spears. The flavors were divine, and each bite was a testament to the culinary skills of the hotel chef. Their dinner was punctuated by sips of a fine red wine that complemented their meal beautifully. The rich, velvety notes of the wine enhanced the flavors of their dishes and added to the overall sense of indulgence. As the evening continued and dessert menus were presented, they couldn't resist the allure of a shared chocolate lava cake. The warm, gooey center spilled out as they broke through the delicate exterior, a sweet ending to a perfect meal. Throughout the dinner, their connection deepened, and the world around them seemed to fade into the background. They lost track of time, lost in the enchantment of the moment, knowing that this was a night they would cherish forever. Amidst the romantic ambience of the restaurant, a violinist suddenly appeared, their presence adding a touch of magic to the evening. With graceful movements, the violinist began to play Ed Sheeran's Perfect. The sweet, melodic notes filled the air, weaving a musical tapestry that enveloped John and Terri. As the first strains of the song filled the room, John couldn't help but lock eyes with Terri, his heart swelling with emotion. The lyrics seemed to resonate with their own journey, and their connection deepened with every note. I found a love for me, darling, just dive right in and follow my lead. The violinists serenaded, their instrument speaking the words that John felt in his heart. Terri's gaze never left him, and a tender smile played at the corners of their lips. I found a girl, beautiful and sweet. The violinist continued, the music wrapping around them like a warm embrace. John reached across the table, his fingers gently finding Terri's, their hands intertwining as they savored this moment of serendipity. I never knew you were someone waiting for me. The world around them seemed to fade away, leaving only the enchanting melody and the profound connection they shared. With every lyric, every chord, their love story was being written in the music that surrounded them. As the final notes of the song lingered in the air, the violinist's bow came to a graceful rest. The room was filled with a shared sense of wonder and gratitude for this unexpected musical gift that had made their evening even more perfect. During their dinner together, John shared some of his stories with Terri, including a few where he used the alias of Michael Walker, which was originally associated with another individual. In a playful manner, Terri expressed her fondness for the name Michael and jokingly referred to John as Michael Walker a few times, drawing connections to the stories he shared. After their exquisite dinner, John and Terri decided to take a leisurely stroll around the hotel's elegant lobby, adorned with a collection of captivating artworks. The soft glow of ambient lighting accentuated the beauty of each piece, casting a warm and inviting atmosphere. They meandered through the lobby, pausing to admire each painting and sculpture as if they were exploring a private art gallery. The artwork ranged from classical portraits to contemporary abstract pieces, providing a rich tapestry of artistic expression. Terri's eyes sparkled with appreciation for the creativity on display, while John couldn't help but share in her enthusiasm. They engaged in a lively discussion about their favorite pieces, exchanging thoughts and interpretations that revealed their shared appreciation for art. As they continued their artistic journey through the lobby, their connection deepened with each shared moment. The art became a backdrop to their budding romance, a testament to the beauty they found in each other's company. In that enchanting lobby, amidst the art and the soft melodies playing in the background, John and Terri discovered that their connection extended beyond the visual and auditory realms. It was a connection of the heart, a masterpiece in the making. John reminisces about his youth when he entertained the idea of becoming an artist. However, most of his sketches from that time were inspired by the popular TV series of that era, Beauty and the Beast. He fondly recalls how he has always been drawn to any story that featured a romantic connection. As they walked back to their hotel rooms together after their enchanting dinner, John's thoughts raced like a tempestuous sea. He couldn't deny the electrifying connection he felt with Terri, a connection that had deepened with every shared moment. When they reached their rooms, Terri turned to him with a subtle, inviting smile, and her eyes conveyed the unspoken desire between them. She softly asked, "Would you like to come in for a while?" John met her gaze, his eyes reflecting a mixture of longing and uncertainty. He responded, his voice filled with both temptation and wisdom, "If I did, then I would never want to leave." It was an acknowledgement of the powerful pull they felt toward each other, coupled with the awareness that crossing that threshold could change everything. With that, they stood at the precipice of a decision, hearts racing, and the night holding its breath in anticipation of what might come next. As they parted ways for the night, John leaned in, gently brushing his lips against Terri's cheek in a tender, lingering kiss. To his delight, Terri turned towards him, returning the kiss with warmth and passion. As she entered her hotel room and closed the door behind her, a surge of emotions overwhelmed her. Leaning against the closed door, she took a deep, shuddering breath. Her heart raced with excitement, and she turned to the nearby mirror. A radiant smile graced her lips as she gazed at her reflection, her eyes sparkling with the promise of new beginnings. Terri knew that this night had the potential to change everything, and she couldn't help but embrace the enchanting possibilities that lay ahead. Still trembling with exhilaration, Terri reached into her purse and retrieved her wallet. Carefully, she pulled out her driver's license, her fingers trembling ever so slightly with anticipation. With eager eyes, she scrutinized the date of birth printed on the identification card. "I'm not 18, she tells herself, and this is not my high school crush." She looks at her driver's license again. She exhales, a cool breath of air, and there is a scent of peaches. Maybe it was from the last drink she had. That night, as Terri lay down on her comfortable hotel bed, her mind was a whirlwind of thoughts as sweet as honey. The events of the day, the unexpected encounters, and the enchanting dinner with John raced through her head like a vivid dream. It was as if the universe had orchestrated their meeting, and she couldn't help but savor every moment. Slowly, the weight of the day's adventures began to lull her into a state of peaceful relaxation. The soft, plush pillows cradled her head, and the cozy blankets cocooned her in warmth. With each breath her eyelids grew heavy, and Terri welcomed the embrace of sleep. She knew that her dreams would be filled with the echoes of laughter, the twinkle in John's eyes, and the promise of a connection that held infinite possibilities. It was a night where reality and dreams intertwined, and as she closed her eyes, she surrendered to the enchantment of the moment, and soon she was fast asleep. Suddenly, a series of deafening explosions echoed through the air, one after another, like thunderclaps in a stormy sky. Terri's heart raced as she leaped out of bed, her instincts urging her to find out what was happening. She rushed to the window, her breath catching in her throat as she gazed upon a scene that defied all logic and reason. Before her eyes, the tranquil hotel room had transformed into something entirely different. The year was no longer 2023, but rather 1863, and the peaceful town of Perryville had given way to the hallowed grounds of Gettysburg, Pennsylvania. The once modern streets were now dirt roads filled with soldiers in Union and Confederate uniforms, their bayonets gleaming in the harsh light of day. Terri's heart pounded in her chest as she watched the chaos unfold. The distant sounds of battle grew louder, the unmistakable cries of men in the throes of combat filling the air. Smoke billowed on the horizon, and the acrid scent of gunpowder stung her nostrils. She couldn't believe her eyes, couldn't comprehend how she had been transported through time to one of the most pivotal moments in American history. Was this a dream, a hallucination, or something more inexplicable? Terri's mind raced with questions, but there were no answers to be found. As she stood by the window, she knew that she was no longer an observer but a part of this harrowing tableau. The fate of those caught in the midst of battle hung in the balance, and Terri had been thrust into reality where the past and present collided in a way she could never have imagined. After Terri's initial shock began to subside, her thoughts turned to Michael. She felt an urgent need to see him, to see if he was there with her in the dream. Without hesitation, and realizing that she only had one short nightgown, she rushed across the hall to Michael's room and began knocking on the door with a sense of urgency. To her surprise, the door swung open, revealing Michael inside the room. He was in the midst of putting on clothes that he had found in the wardrobe closet. As Terri stood there in her negligee, her eyes met Michael's. "Michael," she said, "I thought I was having a dream, but you're in my dream, and what's going on?" Michael, caught in a trance, didn't register a word she had spoken. His attention was entirely fixated on Terri. Terri raced across the room in a second, and she was looking out his window, and it had the same view. She turned around and looked down at her attire, and then back up to Michael's face. "Michael," she said, realizing he was staring at her. To bring him out of his trance, she slapped his arm. Michael looked at his arm as if it had committed some offense. Michael smiled at Terri while he said, "I asked if you wanted an adventure. Well, I guess this is the adventure you were thinking about. How did we get here?" She turned back to Michael, suddenly aware of her attire that was somewhat pleasantly revealing to Michael. She spoke over her shoulder as she met his gaze. "Michael," she said, recognizing that he was still entranced, "we seem to be sharing this dream." Michael said from his eyes, "The version is much better." She playfully swatted his arm and shouted, "Michael, Michae, I'll try to drown out the sounds of artillery rounds falling in the courtyard." Michael, still with his back to her, looked at his arm with a bemused expression, as if it had somehow his arm had misbehaved. Terri couldn't help but find the situation somewhat amusing, as if she were watching a scene from a movie. However, she quickly realized that this was real, and she needed Michael to come back to reality with all his senses intact. "Michael, you were in the army. Surely you know what to do in a situation like this." Michael nodded and replied, "Yes, I did. I served in 3 different wars, but back then I had gunships and fast-moving aircraft laden with napalm and radio communication to call on them and destroy the enemy." Terri, with her head turned around, and looked at the backside of Michael, giving him a perturbed look of anger. "Gosh, Terri," he continued, "whenever it looked like we were outnumbered or faced with an attack like this, we could quickly get on a bird and hide out of Dodge City." "Gosh," Michael said back then, "I think I could get on the radio, order a cheese pizza from the battlefield, and DoorDash deliver it. I can do it here," he says, "if I could just find my phone." Just then a musket ball broke through the window, shattering the wall beside them. Terri slapped Michael's same offending arm, "and we had to do something." "You're right, Miss Scarlet, we need to do something or we're going to be killed." "Turn around and stop looking at me," Terri said. A stern and serious expression crossed Terry's face, making Michael realize he needed to kick things into high gear. Without wasting a moment, he hurried back to the wardroom closet. With his head turned away, he handed Terri a dress, asking, "Can you wear this?" She held up the dress, an old, dark blue one, and remarked, "My gown. My beautiful gown." has turned into a pumpkin. She examined the dress and added, "It's an old-fashioned dress, not even in style, and I'll probably look terrible in it." Quickly urged Michael, "We need to get out of here, and you can't be running around that battlefield with you dressed in a negligee." "Don't worry," he reassured her. "I'll call Neiman Marcus as soon as I find my phone." "I'm sure you will," she said, playfully giving his arm another playful slap. She stepped back toward Michael and began to undress, all the while catching Michael trying to sneak a peek in the bedroom mirror. She lightly slapped his cheek in jest. After some fumbling with the dress, including pulling it on backward before correcting it, she managed to get it on properly. Once dressed, she turned to face Michael, who had turned his head away when he realized her back was against his. Sheepishly, he grinned and said, "I was starting to think this war was turning out pretty nice." He expected another playful slap, but it never came. With Terri now successfully attired in the vintage dress, Michael seized her arm, and together they made a daring escape down the stairs to the lobby. Terri snatched an ancient drawstring purse hanging inconspicuously behind a door, while Michael led the charge down the creaky, time-worn stairs. As they descended, they stumbled upon a relic of transportation. There waiting for them was an old buggy hitched to a horse, looking like it had just dropped in from a movie set of Gone with the Wind. Michael, displaying impressive gallantry, gently lifted Terri by her waist and gracefully deposited her onto the front seat of the buggy. He then joined her on board, ready for a wild horse-drawn adventure through time. As the horse-drawn buggy sped toward the southwestern side of the historic city of Gettysburg, Michael couldn't help but turn to Terri with a mischievous grin and ask, "Did you happen to bring that negligee along, just in case?" Terri raised an eyebrow and replied, "Why on earth would I need a negligee right now?" Michael chuckled. "Well, Scarlett, you never know when history might take an unexpected turn, my dear. Plus, we could use it as a flag of surrender if things get dicey." Michael playfully shifted his defending shoulder closer to Terri, as if waiting for her to deliver another one of her characteristic slaps. Reaching a distant hilltop, Michael and Terri gazed down upon the unfolding chaos of the battlefield. Terri couldn't help but feel a sense of urgency, and said, "We need to help the Union Army. They could use all the help they can get." Michael stood there, his face reflecting a mixture of shock and resolve. He firmly stated, "My family is on the other side, my dear. I can't bring myself to help the enemy." As Michael and Terri rode farther and farther west, the only direction that the road took them, the sun dipped below the horizon, casting a dim twilight over the landscape. In the fading light, they spotted a place that offered lodging, a beacon of hope amidst the uncertainty of their adventure. With a sense of relief, they entered a small town with a hotel. Together they approached the front desk. The weary innkeeper, who seemed equally relieved that everyone was leaving the battlefield, looked up and said, "We've got only one room available, folks. It's been quite a day. You two are married, right?" And in unison they both said yes. They looked at each other, and Terri whispered into Michael's ear, "Do you think my negligee would come in handy tonight?" Michael whispers back, "Miss Scarlett, I am shocked that you would even suggest such a thing." Michael and Terri exchanged a knowing glance and accepted the single room with gratitude. It seemed that fate had decided to bring them even closer together. Michael couldn't resist the opportunity to share a playful glance with Terri. He turned toward her, locking eyes with a mischievous twinkle that seemed to say those words that were not necessary. "Excuse me, sir," Michael said, "could someone look after our horse and buggy for the night and make sure our pony is well fed?" The innkeeper, who was accustomed to such requests from travelers passing through, nodded and replied, "Of course, sir. We'll take good care of your horse and make sure he has a full belly." Michael realized that he only had his MasterCard and a small amount of change to pay for their lodging in the morning. 27 cents a quarter with Washington's face and 2 pennies with Abraham Lincoln, both dated after 2014. Michael turned to Terri and asked her with a hint of nostalgia, "Are you enjoying this dream, Terri?" She smiled and replied, "Of course I am, Michael. It's like we've stepped into a time machine." Michael nodded and shared a cinematic reference, saying, "You know, in the movie Somewhere in Time, Christopher Reeve goes back in time to find this beautiful woman, Jane Seymour, and they fall deeply in love in the year 1910. It was only when Reeves pulled a 1979 penny from his vest pocket that he realized it was not 1910, and he awakened from his dream. So I don't want to pay with modern change. Besides, all the coins of this time period are totally different from our generation." Terri listened attentively as Michael continued, "I don't want to wake up from this dream either, not just yet, but to stay in this moment. We might have to find a way to make some money while we're here." Together they walked up the stairs, put the skeleton key in the door lock, and opened the door. The room was on the second floor, and when entered the room they noticed a single bed, an old wooded, a rickety chair, 2 vases of water, and 2 towels sitting on the dresser with a mirror. Under the bed they found 2 chamber pots with 2 towels draped across the top. Upon entering the room on the second floor, Michael and Terri took in their quarters. The atmosphere exuded an air of nostalgia, with antique furnishings that would one day be relics from a bygone era. There stood a solitary, rickety wooden bed that appeared to have witnessed countless nights of history unfolding. Beside it, an old chair stood as if ready to tell stories of its own. The room's dresser was a testament to the simplicity of the times, and a mirror that had surely reflected the faces of countless travelers passing through. Michael and Terri exchanged a glance, their eyes filled with curiosity and amusement. It seemed that their adventure had taken yet another unexpected turn, and they couldn't help but wonder what other surprises were in store for them. They both looked at the small bed, and Michael decided, saying, before Terri had a chance to say anything, "They'll sleep on the floor, Terri. You can have the bed." Terri, appreciative of his gesture, replied, "Thank you, Michael. You're a gentleman." Michael said he was going downstairs and looking around while she freshened up. Terri laid her purse on the bed while she went to the dresser mirror and washed the dirt from her face. She walked back over to the bed and lay down, sinking into the feather bed. She picked up the small purse, opened its drawstring, and looked inside, finding some face rouge that she was sure the previous owner must have used on their cheeks and maybe her lips. She also found a piece of colored paper she opened and read aloud. "Terri, I wanted to take a moment to express my sincere gratitude for the wonderful evening we shared last night. Your presence illuminated the room, and our conversation filled the air with laughter and genuine connection. Your insights, your warmth, and your captivating smile made the evening truly special. I feel incredibly fortunate to have had the opportunity to get to know you better, and I'm looking forward to many more moments like these. Thank you for sharing your stories and dreams, and for allowing me to be a part of your world, even if just for a night." Michael, July 1, 1863. "Oh my God," she thought. He wrote that note this morning on the first day of the battle. After half an hour had passed since Michael left, there came a knock at the door. Terri, curious and perhaps a bit surprised, opened the door to find Michael standing there with a smile that stretched from ear to ear. He looked like a cat that had just caught a mouse, radiating happiness and excitement. Michael's eyes sparkled with enthusiasm as he exclaimed, "You won't believe this, Terri. The famous actor John Wilkes Booth is putting on a show tonight. Would you like to meet him?" Terri's eyes lit up with excitement as she replied, "Yes, I would love to meet him, and I wish I had a phone to snatch a photo as a keepsake." The prospect of meeting such a renowned historical figure and capturing the moment was truly thrilling for her. Terri's voiced her concern about not having the right attire for the evening at the theater was met with a delightful surprise as Michael reached into his pocket and pulled out a beautiful red rose. He gently placed it in her hair and said with a charming smile, "My dear Miss Scarlett, you will be the most beautiful lady at the theater tonight." Michael, with a playful glint in his eye, teased, "Do you want to hit me?" as he gestured his arm toward Terri. Terri, not one to back down from a challenge, replied with a mischievous smile, "No, I want to kiss you," and planted a sweet kiss on his cheek. They both went down the stairs, her arm locked in Michael. When they reached the theater, they learned that the actor John Wilkes Booth was not going to perform until November 18, 1863. Michael had misread the poster on the wall. Michael remarked, "November 18 is the day when Abraham Lincoln delivered his Gettysburg Address at the cemetery. Hopefully, we'll find ourselves back in our world by that date." Michael inquired if Terri needed to return back to her home soon, and she replied, "Yes, I do." Michael's expression grew somewhat forlorn as he jokingly added, "Oh, I suppose you have a date then?" However, Terri looked up at Michael with a grin and responded, "No, not a date. I have to feed my cat. Maybe my son Stephen can take care of him." "But Michael, wipe that victorious grin off your face like you just won the lottery," Terri teased. Once in the theater, Michael couldn't help but notice the piano player and the man with the 5-string guitar playing and singing lovely ballads in the corner of the room. He turned to Terri with a sly grin and exclaimed, "Look, Terri, it's karaoke night." The unexpected entertainment added another layer of fun to their adventure, and they eagerly joined the crowd in enjoying the music and singing along, perhaps even considering their own karaoke debut later in the evening. Michael stood taking Terri's hand as he guided her up on the stage. "I've never done this before," says Terri. "I haven't either," said Michael, "and in fact, the last time I sang they were throwing beer bottles at me, but I was behind a wire cage, and that was in a little country bar just south of Dallas, Texas. Hopefully, that wasn't an old tradition." The crowd hushed in anticipation as Michael settled into the piano chair, his fingers poised above the keys. Terri stood nearby, leaning on the piano with an encouraging look in her eyes, supporting him in this impromptu performance. While looking directly into Terri's eyes, he sang "Baby, Lock Them Doors and Turn the Light Down Low. Let's play some music that is soft and slow. Terri, we ain't got no place to go, I hope you understand. I've been thinking about you all day long. Terry's jaw dropped in amazement as she listened to Michael's deep, baritone voice that sounded remarkably like Josh Turner's. She couldn't believe her ears, and her heart swelled with pride. She reached down and gently touched Michael's face, her eyes filled with admiration and affection. Never felt a feeling quite this strong. I can't believe how much you're turning me on. Just to be your man, oh my Michael, she whispered. You sound so good, and you play the piano beautifully. Don't stop. Keep playing. No need to hurry, we can take our time. Come a little closer. As the crowd of people became increasingly enthralled with Michael's unexpected performance, they started throwing pennies up onto the stage in appreciation. Michael, turning to Terry with a grin, whispered, Well, Terry, it looks like our dinner for the next few days is taken care of. Feeling the spirit of the moment and wanting to share the stage with Terry, Michael turned to her and asked, Terry, would you like to sing? Terry hesitated for a moment and replied, I can't sing, but you can, and look, we've made almost $1.73. Michael, having his ego fed by the applauding people, kept right on playing and singing his songs to Terry. Before they left the theater around midnight, Terry had already collected more than $38 that Terry converted into paper money, and she slid it into Michael's pocket. It was getting late, so they thanked everyone and returned to the hotel. At the end of the night, they had a simple dinner that cost only 35 cents and then went to their bedroom. Michael didn't have a proper bed, so he crouched on the floor and used a thin blanket to lie on and another as a pillow. While in bed, he listened to Terry sleeping. Michael woke early, got up, washed, took the dirty water down the stairs, and went outside to the bathroom behind the hotel. Afterward, he put fresh water in a vase, thinking that Terry might want some water in the morning. When Michael returned to the room, he found Terry already awake, dressed, and sitting on the bed. Terry was reading another one of Michael's messages, which seemed to mysteriously keep appearing in her drawstring purse. As Michael opens the door fully and steps inside, Terry looks up and says to Michael, You're crazy, waving his latest note in her hand. Well, don't tell anyone that I am. I worry they'll put me into an asylum, and that's no place to be at this time in history. Terry asks, When do you find time to compose these notes? Then she said, What are we going to do today? Michael said that we're going to have to go west. The battles are still being fought east of here. We don't want to be involved in that. They went downstairs and have a light breakfast, and then out the front door when Michael notices a dry goods store. Arm in arm, they walk over to the store, and Michael buys Terry a new traveling outfit and a bonnet to match the color of her eyes. They spend an hour shopping, and they leave the store looking like scarlet and red as they climb back up on their buggy. The road consisted of loose dirt and mud puddles, but they continued on down the road, going slowly, trying to avoid the mud flying up from the buggy wheels. They followed the old farm path, which one day would probably be an asphalt country road. The road is rough and difficult to navigate, with the bumps and gullies and crossing shallow creeks and occasional fallen tree limbs that have blocked the road. Michael hands the horse reins to Terry as he climbs down, moving one tree to the side. Later in the early evening, their buggy suffers from a broken wooden spoke on the front right wheel. They're lucky as there is an old farmhouse just off to the side of the road. It's a poor house, weathered and nestled on the outskirts of a small, rural community. It was a one-story structure, constructed primarily from rough-hewn wooden planks that had seen better days. The exterior bore the scars of time, with peeling whitewash revealing the grain of the weathered wood beneath. The roof, made of wooden shingles, had patches here and there, evidence of countless repairs over the years. Chimney smoke, often more gray than white, would occasionally curl out, indicating the meager warmth inside. The dog is barking, and a man and woman come out and see the couple with a broken spoke on their buggy. Terry notices the name on the mailbox as the man introduces himself and his wife. The man says it is late, but they could stay in the barn for the night, and in the morning they would remove the wheel and take it into town and have the blacksmith make the repairs. The young woman invites them into the house for dinner since they are just getting ready to eat. The windows, small and scarce, were fitted with simple glass panes that let in minimal light, making the interior perpetually dim. Inside, the living quarters were sparse and functional. The main room, serving as both a living and sleeping area, featured a rough-hewn wooden floor. A few rickety wooden chairs and a simple, unadorned wooden table were the only items of furniture. The stone hearth dominated one wall, providing the sole source of heat and a place for cooking simple meals. The sleeping area consisted of little more than straw-stuffed mattresses covered with worn, threadbare blankets. Flickering candlelight or the soft glow of the fireplace has very little illumination after sunset. A small, plain wooden crib held the one-year-old infant, carefully guarded and cherished amidst the harsh conditions. Terry is holding Michael's arm, and she leans toward him and whispers and says to Michael, This is my great-great-grandparents. Well, I think we're somewhere in Young Township, Indiana County, Pennsylvania. The walls bore the scars of time and poverty, with faded patches where wallpaper had long peeled away. The room's inhabitants made do with meager possessions, the evidence of their struggles etched into every corner of their meager abode. Michael and Terri walk into the humble dwellings. Michael, look that little girl over there in crib. Michael, that's Catherine, my grandmother, in the crib. She's just a year old. Terri is holding Michael and crying. The woman is saying, here now, don't you fret, we'll get that wheel back on your buggy and you'll be on your way in no time. Terri looked around the room and knew it was a time when poverty clung to every corner and families struggled to make ends meet. Terri, with a heart filled with compassion and empathy, wondered how her struggling family living in a meager poorhouse was able to make a living and survive. She clung to Michael and asked him if there was a way we could help them. I don't know if I could continue singing and share the money with them, or I could invent the light bulb or even the telephone, but I don't think we have time for that. Terri, looking at the baby, says, thank you, Michael. Terri walks over to the baby crib and says, may I hold your little girl? The crib laid a fragile 1-year-old baby swaddled in a threadbare blanket. Terri's heart swelled with compassion as she observed the child's innocent face, oblivious to the struggles that surrounded her. Unable to resist the urge to offer comfort, Terri gently extended her hand towards the baby. For land's sake, young lady, of course you can. I guess you don't have any youngins. I was just getting ready to feed her. Maybe you would like to. Terri, in tears, sitting down in a rocking chair holding her grandmother in her arms, reaches out to touch Michael's arm and says, thank you, Michael. You promised an adventure, but I never expected this. Tears welled up in Terri's eyes as she carefully held the little girl in her arms. She leans against Michael and whispered, isn't she a beautiful little girl? Look at her little fingers. Yes, she's just like her granddaughter, and look, she has your eyes. Terri leans against Michael's shoulder as she watches this little girl look up, smile, and laugh. Michael, I wish we could do something to help them make their life a little more bearable. I don't know or understand what we're doing here. I don't know if it's safe to make changes in history. Oh, I do understand, Michael, but what I'm holding in my arms is not just a little girl, it's a grandmother. And one day she'll be holding me, singing lullabies. Terri began to sing, you are my sunshine, my only sunshine. You make me happy when skies are gray. You'll never know, dear, how much I love you. Please don't take my sunshine away. The little girl eventually fell asleep and was gently handed back to her mother. Terri turned her attention to her grandmother, who said, well, we don't have much to eat, but please help yourself. Terri took a few bites of biscuits and gravy while her grandmother continued to share stories about their lives. After dinner, Terri assisted her grandmother with some of the woman's chores, while her grandfather began to question Michael about his reputation. Michael found himself struggling to come up with a satisfactory story to explain himself. Michael observed the advancing hour and mentioned that his wife was feeling a bit under the weather. He kindly asked if it would be all right for them to be shown to the barn. Carrying a couple of blankets, they entered the weathered barn where their horse and mule were kept. There, they arranged a cozy bed in the straw and bid their hosts good night. Lying beside Michael, Terri whispered softly, thank you, Mr. Welker. You've given me more than you will ever know. Good night, sir. As morning arrived, a crowing rooster roused everyone from their slumber. Michael promptly rose from his bed and opened the barn door and made his way to the well. He drew a bucket of water to wash his face. Meanwhile, Terri's grandmother brought out a couple of towels and a wash basin. After Michael finished washing, he filled the basin with water and placed a bar of soap and a towel on the shelf in the barn for Terri's use. He then closed the barn door and joined Terri's grandfather to assist with the removal of the broken wheel. When Terri emerged from the barn, the two men had just finished removing the wheel. Upon spotting Michael, she gave him a playful wink. Terri then joined her great-grandmother, while the two men set off towards town to visit the blacksmith. I asked about the amount of land he owned, and he informed me that he had 120 acres. However, he expressed that it had become challenging to manage the farm with all the young men away fighting in the war. 3 hours later, the two men returned and began the task of reattaching the wheel to the buggy, followed by hitching up the horse. Terri and Michael exchanged their goodbyes, and Michael left $3 on the kitchen table, understanding that the family wouldn't accept the money if offered. Terri couldn't help but feel a deep sense of sorrow as they rode along, knowing that she was unable to do any more for her family. I'm sorry, Michael, Terri said with a heavy heart. I'm just not in a happy mood right now. They continued their journey down the old dirt road at a leisurely pace, their destination and future uncertain. As evening approached, 3 horsemen in dark clothing approached and halted the couple's progress. The taller man among them inquired, where are you headed? Michael responded, we're going as far as we can get away from the war that's raging in the east. Perhaps down to Perryville, Missouri. I have family there. You have family there? What's the name? The man asked again. The name's Welker, Michael replied, and my wife is a Tyler. Welkers, I know the Welkers, they are all good family. My name is Cole Younger. Terri was taken aback and exclaimed, "My gosh, are you Thomas Coleman Younger, one of the boys of Henry Younger from down in Jackson County?" Cole nodded and said, "Well, yes, I am." Terri couldn't contain her excitement and exclaimed, "Well, Cole, we're cousins." For the next 10 minutes, Terri and Cole talk about family members. Cole says he can talk for a long time. They were meeting up with Bill Quantrill for a raid over into Kansas. Cole asked if we could do him a favor. He robbed a Yankee paymaster of 30,000 Yankee dollars, and they don't want to take a chance of getting caught up here in Yankee country. Perhaps we could carry the money back into Missouri, and since a young couple like us would never draw suspicion of robbing a Yankee paymaster. Absolutely, Terri replied enthusiastically. But how do we get the money back to you? Cole reassured them, saying, "Don't worry about that. I know Louis Welker, and I'll stop at his house to pick it up. If you'd like, take 2,000 and use it any way you want." Cole then turned to another man in the group who handed them the saddlebags filled with money, and the three riders took off at a gallop. "Well, Mr. Walker, where are we going now?" Terri inquired. Michael turned to her with a reassuring smile and said, "You know, the best thing to do when a woman is upset or sad." Terri responded, "Well, not really." Michael chuckled and replied, "We'll make a stop when we reach the next big town, and then we're going shopping for you." "Well, my gosh, where have you been all my life?" Terri exclaimed as she snuggled up to Michael. Terri gazed at Michael and asked, "Where are you going and what are we going to be doing?" Michael turned around with a mischievous grin and replied, "I'm going to see if they've got a Rolls-Royce dealership here." When Terri emerged from the Mercantile, they were directed to a chauffeur coach and driver waiting to transport them to the finest hotel in Pittsburgh. Terri suggested that Michael consider getting a haircut to blend in better with the locals. With some reluctance, Michael walked across the street and found himself in front of a barber shop. As he entered, he noticed a group of Yankee officers standing around outside. He eventually secured a chair inside, and to his surprise, the Yankee general was seated next to him. As the barbers finished their work, one of them asked the general if he would like a scented tonic applied to his hair. The general took a whiff of the tonic and chuckled, saying, "No, if my wife smelled this on me, she would think I was in a house of ill repute." The other barber turned to Michael and asked, "I suppose you don't want this on your hair either?" Michael smiled and replied, "Go ahead and put it on my hair. My wife has never been in a house of ill repute, so she would never know." The general turned to Michael, looking slightly taken aback, and asked, "Are you trying to insinuate that my wife has been to a house of prostitution?" Michael quickly clarified, "No, sir. I didn't mean that at all." He got up, paid the barber, and promptly left the shop, making his way back to the hotel. When Michael arrives back at the hotel, he climbs the stairs to his room and enters to find that Terri has already ordered dinner and the waiter is bringing the food at that moment. As I stepped into the room, my eyes were drawn to the woman before me. Just a couple of days earlier, she had been dressed in simple clothes and covered in straw from spending a night in a barn. Now here sits a beautiful woman, a vision of elegance and grace. Her presence commands attention the very moment you see her. She's dressed impeccably, her outfit chosen with care to complement her features and highlight her golden hair. As she sits across the table from me now, I can see her eyes sparkle with a mix of excitement and anticipation. She draws me into the place where I have never been before. Her conversation is engaging and intelligent, filled with laughter and thoughtful insights. He listens intently, making her feel like the most important person in the world at that moment, when she really is. I watch her from the corner of my eyes as she takes pleasure in the culinary experience, savoring each bite with a combination of delight and appreciation for the flavors. Her gestures are graceful, adding to the charm that surrounds her. In the soft glow of candlelight, her beauty radiates, and I can't help but be captivated by her presence. She is the perfect companion for me on this enchanted evening. I want to pinch myself to make sure all of this is not a dream, but dare not as I might awake. This memory that she gave me will last for years, or until the next time I see her like this. After dinner, when all the plates along with the waiter and staff had departed, Terri informed me that there was only one king-size bed in the room. I immediately offered to order another bed. Shyly, she looked at me and said, "The bed is large enough for two if you can stay on your side." I couldn't help but laugh and replied, "I'm in a hotel room with one bed, and the most beautiful woman I've ever seen is asking me if I can remain a gentleman." "Yes," she says. After pondering for a while, Michael says, "I think I can make that work. Let me go downstairs and see if I can find a constable who has handcuffs. Let me think how I can do this. I can lock myself to one side of the bed, but that would only work as long as you promise not to take advantage of me while I'm handcuffed." Terri gave him a long, serious stare. In the morning, Terri was the first to wake. She slipped into her white robe and made her way to the door, pulling the cord to summon a maid. When the maid arrived, Terri said, "I would like to take a bath this morning, and please have my clothes laid out on the sofa." Okay, as Terri sat by the window, watching Michael still sleeping peacefully, she found herself quietly laughing, doing her best to stifle her chuckles. Shortly thereafter, the maid returned and informed Terri that her hot bath was ready and waiting for her. Shortly after Terri had left, Michael got up and pulled on the same cord. Another maid promptly appeared at the door, and Michael expressed his desire for a bath. The maid informed him there's another bath in the adjoining room next to Mrs. Walker's. Would that be suitable for you? Michael nodded and replied, that will be just fine, thank you. As they both bathed with a short 5 feet wall between them, and hearing each other splash in the water, Terri inquired, how did you sleep last night, Mr. Walker? With a playful tone, Michael responded, if you were a man, you would never ask me a question like that. Terri chuckled and replied, you are a true gentleman, Mr. Walker. Mr. Walker, today is Sunday. Would you like to join me for church services? Terri asked. Michael laughed and replied, Terri, I was raised a Catholic, maybe not a very good one, but still a Catholic. I'd probably have to go to confession, and it might take hours. Terri teased, oh, would it take you hours to confess your sins? With a grin, Michael replied, well, I don't know about sins, but I'm thinking about thoughts. They might be sins. Not sure if they count. Since attending church was important to Terri then, it was important to Michael. Michael and Terri entered the church arm in arm and found a pew and took their seats. Shortly afterward, the minister walked down the aisle, stood behind the pulpit, and gave the following sermon, Dear brothers and sisters in Christ. Today, I want to delve into an essential aspect of our Christian faith. Let us begin with the call to care for the poor. Throughout the Bible, we find numerous references to the importance of compassion and assistance to those in need. In Matthew 25:40, Jesus reminds us, truly, I say to you, as you did it to one of the least of these my brothers, you did it to me. Our acts of kindness and generosity toward the less fortunate are a direct reflection of our love for Christ. In a world filled with economic disparities and social injustices, it's our Christian duty to reach out to those who are struggling. This extends beyond material assistance. It involves offering our time, our love, and our support. By following the example of Jesus, who ministered to the poor and marginalized, we can bring hope to those who need it most. May God bless you all, and may His love guide your lives in compassion and faithfulness. Amen. As the service ended, Michael and Terri walked out of the church hand in hand and made them walk down to a park along a pond. It wasn't that bad, was it, Michael? I said no, it was not bad at all. When they reached the park, they rented a blanket and found a shade tree to sit beneath. Michael asked one of the attendees if it were possible to have some bring them a picnic lunch with a light red wine and maybe some cheese. As they sat beneath the tree, the gentle breeze rustled the leaves overhead, creating a soothing ambience. Terri, feeling the coolness of the grass against her skin, couldn't resist the temptation to lay her head in Michael's lap. With a tender smile, he began to feed her small bites of cheese and grapes, savoring the romantic moment they were sharing. Looking deep into Terri's eyes, Michael softly said, It's nice being married to you, Mrs. Walker. His words carried a warmth that matched the sun's gentle rays filtering through the tree branches, casting dappled patterns of light and shadow on their picnic blanket. As they continued to enjoy their romantic picnic by the pond, the love between them grew stronger, and they cherished the simple joys of being together, hand in hand, under the embrace of nature's beauty. It was a moment that would forever be etched in their hearts as they embarked on this journey of love and companionship. Suddenly, a man with a guitar walked in behind them, his presence seemingly drawn by the romantic atmosphere that surrounded Michael and Terri. Without a word, he began to strum the strings and sing a heartfelt ballad, his voice carrying the emotions of the moment. The music added an enchanting soundtrack to their picnic, making the experience even more memorable and romantic. Michael handed the man a sheet of paper and $2, asking if he could sing and play a particular psalm. He promised that if the performance was excellent, he'd double the reward and asked him to return whenever he could. An hour later, the man returned with his guitar, ready to perform. He began to sing the requested song, pouring his heart and soul into the melody, making it even more beautiful than Michael and Terri had imagined. The heartfelt performance filled the park with music, creating a magical atmosphere for the couple's romantic picnic. I was standing all alone against the world outside. You were searching for a place to hide, lost and lonely. Now you've given me the will to survive. When we're hungry, love will keep us alive. Don't you worry, sometimes you've just got to let it ride. The world is changing right before your eyes. Now I've found you. There's no more emptiness inside. When we're hungry, love will keep us alive. I would die for you. Climb the highest mountain, baby. There's nothing I wouldn't do. Now I've found you. There's no more emptiness inside. When we're hungry, love will keep us alive. I would die for you. Climb the highest mountain, baby. There's nothing I wouldn't do. I was standing all alone against the world outside. As the man sang the song, a group of young girls from the church choir walked past, singing Ave Maria, each handing Terri a flower. Michael, always thoughtful, slipped her another one of his daily notes into her handbag. Moved by the gesture and the romantic moment they were sharing, Terri reached up and gently touched Michael's face. With a soft smile, she said, I don't want to return to our world. I love the one I'm in with you. With that, she pulled Michael's head down, and their lips met in a sweet, lingering kiss. The guitarist continued to sing, providing a beautiful soundtrack to their love-filled moment in the park. They spent most of the afternoon beneath the shade of that tree, where they watched two swans gracefully swimming by on the tranquil pond. It was as though even those swans were enchanted, finding joy in observing these two lovers lost in each other's company. Terri turns to Michael and says, You know, swans ain't made for life. To me, that's a symbol of everlasting love. Michael looks at her, mesmerized in her words as she continues. Michael, others may attempt to imitate my lifestyle and think they understand how it feels, but they will never possess what it takes to walk a mile in my high-heeled shoes. I am a strong, humble, and talented woman. My intelligence may catch you by surprise. When was the last time you encountered a young soul unapologetically awakened and wise beyond their years? God has always been a constant mindset of my growth, and He has been my guiding force. I find peace and confidence in the knowledge that no one can replicate my unique essence. Michael gazed into Terri's eyes and softly replied, I could not have expressed the same sentiments as eloquently as you did. It's as if you looked into my heart and read all the words that I think, that I feel, that I witness in you. You're a beautiful lady inside and out. May I please kiss you again? Terri gives Michael a smirk instead. He is not sure why she told him that, but apparently it was important to her. Later that afternoon, they return to the hotel and lay together next to each other on the bed. Michael holds Terri's hand and says, Terri, Michael said gently, I don't need to make love to you to be in love with you. I just need to know that you're close by, and if by chance one day that should happen, it will be on the day of your choosing when you are certain of your feelings. I'm already certain of mine. They fell asleep alongside each other, still holding each other's hand. It had been a long and exhausting day, and when evening came, Michael awoke to the sensation of a sweet kiss upon his cheek. Terri stood before him, dressed in her riding clothes, and said, Mr. Walker, would you be so kind as to accompany me on an evening ride along the riverfront? My dear Miss Scarlett, I would be honored to accompany you, Michael replied with a gracious smile. They descended the stairs to find a small two-seat buggy with a single horse waiting for them. The bellboy inquired if the buggy met Mr. Walker's approval. Michael nodded and said, Yes, it's perfect. Please place a blanket behind the seat. The night air may get chilly, and I wouldn't want Miss Scarlett to catch a cold. Michael gently lifted Terri and placed her on the seat of the buggy, then joined her, feeling her arm entwined with his. Terri looked at Michael with love in her heart and said, Mr. Butler, wouldn't it have been nice to have met and lived in this town where we are now? I would never make the same mistakes that Scarlett made. Michael met her gaze and replied, We are living in this time, and I don't know where this adventure is going to take us, but let's make it memorable. You know, Terri, Michael began, there was a young girl in my life, just as I'm sure there was a young man in yours at one time. For me, she was a lady I was deeply in love with, but it seemed to me that she loved everyone except the man who loved her. Eventually, she found happiness, and that's all I ever wanted for her. Her happiness. She will never return to your life, Terri remarked. Michael chuckled softly and replied, Not unless she plays the part of a Lazarus. Terri looked apologetic and said, Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to bring up any painful memories. As the sun began to set, casting a warm, golden hue across the landscape, Michael and Terri embarked on a horse and buggy ride along the winding river. The evening was painted with shades of amber and lavender, and the air carried the scent of blooming wildflowers, creating an enchanting atmosphere for their journey. Their trusty horse, with a glossy chestnut coat, pulled the buggy effortlessly along the riverside path. The rhythmic clip-clop of hooves on the gravel road created a soothing cadence, adding to the romantic ambience. Terri, dressed elegantly in a flowing gown, her riding clothes that seemed to catch the fading sunlight, sat gracefully in the buggy. Her eyes sparkled with a mixture of excitement and affection, and her hair caught the soft breeze, framing her radiant face. She says she felt as if she were starring in a TV advertisement. She remembered once seeing a beautiful long-haired girl riding a horse, or perhaps it was a car or motorcycle. Her hair flowed in the wind, and she relished the feeling of being free. Now, at this moment, she was that young, beautiful girl. As they traveled alongside the tranquil river, the water mirrored the ever-changing colors of the sky, from vibrant oranges to deep purples. The gentle ripple of the water's surface added a melodic backdrop to their conversation. Michael, ever the gentleman, held the reins with one hand and with the other reached for Terri's hand, their fingers entwining like two hearts drawn together by fate. They shared stories, dreams, and laughter, their voices carrying on the evening breeze. The fading light painted a warm, romantic glow around them, creating a timeless moment that felt as if it existed outside the constraints of the everyday world. The world seemed to fade away, leaving only the two of them and the magic of the evening. As the stars began to twinkle in the darkening sky, Michael and Terri continued their journey, cherishing the beauty of the moment and the love that blossomed between them. She closed her eyes to dream for a moment, and when she opened them, the world around her was illuminated by the soft, ethereal light of the setting sun. "Oh, Michael," Terri exclaimed, her eyes filled with wonder. "This feels like something out of a fairy tale where the princess meets the prince, and he's everything she could have ever dreamed of as a young girl. I can't wait to get home and tell my daughter." A wistful expression crossed her face as she continued, "But at the same time, I don't want to go home. I want to stay here with you, Mr. Butler." As a chill descended upon them, Michael reached under the seat and pulled out a blanket. He gently wrapped it around Terri, ensuring that she felt warm, but she was getting her warmth by holding Michael in her arms. They returned back to their hotel, and in the morning Michael was up early. He went downstairs to read the news of the war, and as he walked out on the front veranda, he noticed a young boy of 9 or 10 who was missing a leg. Michael inquired, and the boy said it was from a farm accident. Michael returns to the hotel front desk and asks if they could take a chilled pitcher of orange juice up to his room for Mrs. Welker. She's from Northern California, and they love orange juice with their breakfast. The clerk said, "I'll see if we can find some oranges." "Yes, please do that," Michael said, "and when you do, then expect my appreciation." Michael turns to leave and turns around again and says, "Find a florist and send up an arrangement of bright flowers and make her feel as if she's awakened a bright California morning. When I return, I want to see a twinkle in her eyes." Michael walked down the street, where he found a blacksmith shop. He began to make detailed drawings of various items he wanted the blacksmith to craft. The blacksmith carefully examined the drawings and nodded, expressing confidence that he could craft all these items using some lightweight materials. Curious, the blacksmith asked Michael how he had come up with so many ideas. Michael simply replied, "I've traveled to the Far East where these things are quite common." Appreciating the blacksmith's willingness to help, Michael agreed to return in 3 days, eager to see the results. 3 days later, Michael sat on the front veranda, engrossed in reading the most recent reports from the war. He looked up, spotting the young boy, who was missing a leg. He called out to the boy, who joined him on the veranda, urging him to go down the street to the blacksmith's shop. He said the blacksmith was looking for a helper, perhaps an apprentice. Michael explained that he told the blacksmith that he knew a boy who might be well suited for the job. The young boy hesitated, expressing doubt, saying, "He would never want me. I only have one leg, and I could never do that kind of work." But Michael was insistent, assuring the boy that there was potential and opportunity waiting for him. With a newfound sense of hope, the boy hobbled off down the street towards the blacksmith's shop. A short time later, Terri joined Michael on the veranda, and they sat together, sipping their orange juice. They were awaiting their buggy to be brought around, since they were returning to Gettysburg to visit Terry's great-grandmother again. Suddenly, a crowd of people emerged, walking up the street, and to their amazement, the young boy was riding a 3-wheel handicap bike unlike anything anyone had ever seen before. A large group of people gathered around him, their curiosity piqued, bombarding him with question after question, not even allowing him a moment to catch his breath. The young man proudly explained that the blacksmith had given him a job crafting these special bicycles for people who had lost their arms or legs. He held up an artificial leg, announcing that he intended to make those too, but for now, he needed to practice using it to better understand how it works. Terri glanced at Michael, then back at the young boy, and repeated the pattern of looking back and forth, her expression filled with curiosity, a hint of suspicion. Just then, the hotel clerk approached the couple, informing them that their carriage and driver awaited them. "Let's go," Michael said, taking Terry's hand in his. "Mr. Welker," Terri began, turning her gaze toward Michael, and continued to look over her shoulder at the boy as he continued to answer questions. "Do you know anything about this?" Michael flashed a playful grin and replied, "Why, yes, my dear. Didn't you remember we arrived in Pittsburgh driving a horse and buggy? It's only been 2 weeks. I hope you're not getting forgetful about me." Terri playfully slapped his arm, and Michael feigned injury, rubbing his arm as if deeply hurt. With a mischievous glint in her eye, Terri retorted, "You know exactly what I'm talking about. Don't play dumb or stupid, and I can always tell when you're trying to lie. So don't lie to me. You're like a 5-year-old when you lie." Shortly, they set off down the road on their way to Gettysburg, with a black coach driver dressed in a dark suit and top hat skillfully guiding the horses. About an hour away from their destination, the driver brought the coach to a halt, encountering an unexpected obstacle. 2 runaway slaves, accompanied by their wives, were blocking the road with their pushcart, seeking freedom and safety. Michael stepped out of the coach, leaving Terri inside as she listened intently at the window. He approached the runaway slaves and inquired about their origins and their destination. They shared that they were on a quest for freedom in the North. Their master was good to them, but he left to fight in the war and met his demise at Gettysburg. Shortly thereafter, his wife had passed away due to grief. Left without a guardian, and worried they might fall in the hands of one of those cruel masters, they started out on the road in search of their freedom up north. Michael contemplated their situation and suggested that perhaps they could find more sustenance if they were to travel behind the Union Army. However, the runaway slaves vehemently rejected the idea, expressing their distrust to the Yankees. They believed that the Union soldiers treated black men and their all-female women, even girls as young as 10, far worse than they could even imagine. They wanted nothing to do with them Yankee, especially that gay sadistic Sherman who encouraged his men to rape and pillage. Listen, Michael said earnestly, I can't make any guarantees, but I can offer you a very slim chance if you choose to follow me. However, I must warn you that life in the North, no matter what, will still be very difficult. The four of them agreed to follow the coach for about an hour. When Terri reached her family's home, she rushed to the front door and knocked. Her great-grandmother answered, holding her grandmother in her arms. They hurried inside, eager to share their stories, just like so many women who found solace in the comfort of family and the sharing of experiences. Terri recounted the incident when she descended from their hotel room to find Michael engrossed in a poker game. Beside him sat a woman commonly referred to as a soul dove, and she had her hands placed on Michael's shoulder. Terri wasted no time and firmly swatted the woman's hand away, declaring unequivocally that Michael was her man, and she had no intention of sharing him with anyone. The woman promptly left in search of another man at the bar. Terri admitted she was extremely angry with Michael for risking their hard-earned money. She mentioned giving him a light tap on the arm and perhaps a slight tap on the side of his head. Thinking for a second, she said maybe it was more than just a slight tap, but he did get up off the floor eventually, and all the time I was reminding him that this money was their joint savings. I made him stop immediately and extracted a promise from him that he would never again in his life engage in gambling or excessive drinking. As they returned to their room, Terri continued to express her displeasure with Michael. However, her mood took an unexpected turn when he counted out $9,843, her share of the poker winnings, and placed it on the bed for her. Terri was thrilled by the unexpected windfall, but she remained somewhat upset. Terri remarked, "Money won't buy you happiness, Mr. Walker." Michael, with a contrite expression, gazed at her like a scolded schoolboy. Michael greeted Terri's grandfather warmly, and they engaged in a lengthy conversation. It took some time and careful persuasion, but eventually the man agreed to consider Michael's suggestions regarding the two black families following the coach, who was perhaps just 30 minutes behind them. Upon their arrival at the farm, the four black individuals were offered water from the well. Terri's great-grandfather, a wise man, expressed his desire to strike a deal with the two families. He explained that he couldn't manage his entire 120 acres alone, and some of the fertile bottomland needed to be cleared of trees. He proposed an arrangement where their families could work the property, with his assistance, on a 50-50% split of the crop proceeds at the market. Terri's great-grandfather went on to mention that Mr. Walker was willing to purchase 3 acres of land adjacent to his farm, allowing them to build their homes there. There might even be enough space for a small church. In exchange, they would need to commit to living there for 10 years, and Mr. Walker might call upon them for a favor in the future. The families listened carefully and agreed to the plan, grateful for the opportunity for a fresh start. When Michael returns to the house, he listens as Terri talk about her life since they last saw each other. He replied, "You're absolutely right, Scarlett. It might not buy you happiness, but for me, it will bring me happiness through helping others. That's the only happiness I seek, aside from having you by my side." He went on to say that his greatest happiness was not from material things, but a simple love letter that he could never take back for cash or exchange for a different item. Terri held Michael's head in her arms and said, "Where did you come from, Mr. Walker?" Michael said, "Well, a little place in Wentzville, Missouri. It's a place I call the Yellow Rose Estate." "You are crazy, Mr. Walker." "Yes, I know, Scarlett. You keep telling me that, so I guess it must be true." As the evening grew late and the time came to bid farewell, the Walkers reluctantly left behind the charming company they had enjoyed. The journey back to Pittsburgh was relatively quiet, with the gentle of the carriage wheels serving as the backdrop to Terri's occasional bursts of conversation. She would excitedly share stories, anecdotes, and musings, her enthusiasm carrying her from one topic to the next and then circling back to where she began. Michael, ever the attentive listener, absorbed her words with genuine interest, valuing each moment spent in her company. Eventually, a comfortable silence enveloped them. Terri, feeling a sense of contentment and warmth, rested her head gently on Michael's shoulder, finding solace in his presence. As the rhythm of the carriage continued its lulling cadence, she drifted off into a dreamy slumber, carried away to her own serene mansion in the sky. The coach driver's voice broke the peaceful silence, announcing that Pittsburgh was just 20 minutes away, and they would be home soon. Terri stirred from her reverie and turned her gaze toward Michael with a delightful smile gracing her features. It was as though she had been wrapped in the embrace of one of the most beautiful dreams, and Michael was at its heart. With an air of dreamy contentment, she began to speak, as if she were seamlessly continuing a conversation that had started in the depths of her dream. While Michael had also succumbed to sleep, his eyes promptly snapped open, and he tuning with rapt attention as Terri continued her dialogues from the dreamy realms of her mind. He turned his head slightly to gaze upon her, her head still nestled comfortably on his chest, as she forged ahead with her ethereal conversation. Mr. Walker, you see, as one grows older, their perspective on life tends to evolve. Wisdom blooms, and a deeper understanding of the world take root. Love, you see, is not solely about physical intimacy, it's about companionship, shared experiences, and the ability to truly listen and support each other through life's highs and lows. It's about cherishing the uniqueness that each person brings to the relationship without passing judgment or trying to change them. Michael, I want to express how truly sorry I am if I ever misjudged you. I often find myself apologizing, feeling like I'm keeping you waiting for my response, Terri said, her voice filled with affection. Michael gazed at her tenderly and replied, Terri, you never have to apologize to me unless you're leading me on just to break my heart. Tears welled up in Terry's eyes, trickling down like a mountain stream. Terri rises from Michael's shoulder and looks into his blue eyes, and with a heartfelt sincerity, she responds, I'm not going to break your heart, Michael. But I can't help but worry that when we return to our world, some woman in your world might break mine. Michael gently reminded her of a past incident, saying, remember that evening when you came downstairs, and you saw that woman sitting beside me with her arm on my shoulder? Terri nodded, recalling the moment vividly. And do you remember what you said to her? Michael asked. Terry's eyes sparkled with a hint of mischief as she replied, yes, I do. I said, he's my man, and I'm not sharing him with you. As they descended from the coach, stepping onto the veranda's welcoming steps, Terri playfully took hold of Michael's arm and quizzed him, what's on your agenda today, Mr. Walker? Michael, exuding confidence, responded promptly, I plan to purchase Pittsburgh steel. Terri regarded him with a mix of curiosity and amusement, and he met her gaze with a subtle smile. I intend to acquire the land where Andrew Carnegie will construct his steel plant in 16 years. Do you think we'll still be around by then? Terri contemplated the notion for a moment and then replied, I'm not sure, but it won't cost us anything, and it could provide for us and our families for many years to come. I envision a world of good that can be accomplished with that wealth. Money in itself doesn't impress me, but the happiness it can bring to those who are down on their luck or in dire straits, offering them a glimmer of hope when all seems lost. Terri pondered Michael's words for a moment before responding. So you're thinking of establishing a foundation to help people? Michael shook his head, saying, absolutely not. Most of those foundations are run by corporations where the CEOs make millions, and for every dollar donated, only 3 cents actually reach those in need. Throughout my life, I've witnessed countless acts of kindness and individuals who are trying their best but struggling to get ahead. Then, one day, someone comes along and helps them, not by making them rich, but by providing the tools to change their lives. And you do all that without them ever knowing it was you. Making it known every time only tarnishes the act, making it seem like you're seeking recognition. I don't need that. I just need to know that I did something to make a positive difference. Terri gazed at Michael with newfound wonder, her questions from the past finally finding their answers. So, Michael, she began, is that what you did with the little boy who had lost his leg? Michael nodded thoughtfully and replied, maybe, Terri. That little boy you saw may one day become one of the richest men in the world while working alongside Carnegie. Both of them will remember their youth and how someone extended a helping hand in their lives. Both will give all their money away. That land I purchased, where Pittsburgh Steel will operate one day as that little boy's name as a 33% owner, but he doesn't know. It's getting late, Michael suggested. Let's go to bed. And tomorrow, why don't we take a trip? Maybe go to the train station, head on up to Chicago, and then on to Hannibal. Let's explore this world of 1863. Will you join me, Terri? Every day with you at my side is a new adventure, and perhaps Hannibal, Missouri might be the next adventure for us. As they rode the train to Chicago, Terri turned to Michael and said, I've had a few adventures in my life, and if you put them all together, they wouldn't equal the one I'm having with you. Look at who I am, and look at who you are, and here we are together. Shall we call it fate or destiny? Terri mused, that first day I spoke to you on the phone. Your kindness and my desire to do something nice for you, but you refused to accept anything when I wanted so desperately to do something. Now here we are, and hopefully, I'm giving you the adventure of your life, says Michael. Terri looked at Michael, her thoughts racing through her mind. Softly she whispers to herself, maybe you're giving me the love story that I wanted all my life. Michael turned in his seat and looked at her as if he could read her thoughts. Chicago 5 minutes, Chicago 5 minutes, the conductor announces. Upon their arrival in the city, they were greeted by a bustling metropolis teeming with every facet of humanity. Beggars and prostitutes mingled with pickpockets and scam artists, creating a chaotic urban tapestry. This intriguing tapestry intertwined with the middle class and the city's elite, showcasing a stark contrast of societal strata. The streets were soiled and overcrowded, yet their carriage whisked them away to the more refined and sophisticated lakeside district of the city. Terry picked up an advertisement for McVicker's Theater, known for its daytime matinees tailored to women and children and evening performances characterized by refinement. On this particular evening, they were featuring a program titled Lost in the City, a production that combined drama with comedy. Their train was scheduled to depart at midnight, and the show's finale was set for 11 p.m., allowing them just enough time to collect their luggage and catch the train. Unsure about the area around the theater and the potential risks posed by the crowd, Michael approached Terri with a request. He asked her if she'd be willing to carry a small 2-shot Derringer in her purse, just as a precaution in case someone made unwanted advances. Terri, who had never owned a gun before, expressed her hesitation, citing her husband's background as a cop as a reason for her unease with firearms. Michael reassured her gently, saying, "Don't worry, my dear. If someone lays a hand on you, simply pull it out discreetly and fire a warning shot between his legs. Act as if you have no idea who fired the gun, and quickly make your way out of the area. And as for me, I'll be carrying a slightly larger cannon just in case. Michael, I'm having second thoughts about going to the theater. I don't want to risk anything happening and potentially losing you. If that's what you want, then it's what I want too. Let's stay in the hotel lobby until it's time to leave for the train at midnight." It was 11:30, and an open-air coach pulled up to the front of the hotel. Michael and Terri climbed aboard. As they headed toward the train, the driver informed them that there was a fire up ahead, and they would have to try to navigate around it. "I'm sorry," the driver said, "but we're going to have to drive through a rough part of the city when all the shows start closing down." As they turn a corner, they enter a narrow street where there is a rowdy group of drunken men fighting in the street. The driver tries to drive around. When 2 men jump up on the carnage running boards, one says, "Look what we have here. I saw you tonight on stage. Why don't you show me a little more of what you were hiding?" Michael pushed the man back and used his feet in an attempt to kick him off the carriage. Meanwhile, the other man restrained was Michael, preventing him from removing the man in front of Terri. While Michael was fighting off one man, the other regained his balance and continued his advance, placing his hands on the front of Terri's shawl, a sinister smile on his face. Unfazed, Terri calmly addressed the attacker. "Sir, you have 10 seconds to remove yourself from my carriage, or you may never walk again." The man left, thinking it was a bluff, but Terri wasn't finished. She continued, "You have 10 seconds, and 9 of them are gone." With a steady hand, she fired her Derringer into the man's trousers, and he let out a scream that echoed and could be heard as far as the train station. Terri turned to Michael's assailant with a composed demeanor and calmly stated, "Sir, you have 10 seconds to release your grip on my friend." The other man's anguished cries filled the air while the man holding Michael made a hasty retreat. Terri then shifted her attention to the driver and directed him, "Please proceed to the station without delay. We can't be late, and you have 10 seconds to get moving." With that, they set off towards the station at a brisk pace. 5 minutes later, they arrived at the train platform, and throughout the journey, Michael remained eerily silent. Terri finally broke the silence, teasingly remarking, "You're awfully quiet, Michael." Michael continued to stay mute as they ascended the ramp onto the platform, his muttering barely audible. He murmured to himself, "Just 10 seconds, and she didn't even give him that, and she shot him." Terri couldn't resist playfully giving his shoulder a firm tap, rousing him from his thoughts. Michael locked eyes with her and quick, "You didn't give me 10 seconds. Where were my 10 seconds? With a playful smirk, Terri responded, "Well, get over it, Mr. Walker. Life is like a box of chocolates. You never know what you're going to get. What did you want me to say? I'm Clint Eastwood and go ahead, make my day." Terri laughs and says, "I coined a new phrase. Aren't you proud of me?" Michael chuckled, saying, "Yes, I'm proud of you, and I was proud of you that day when you walked into that restaurant. Every face in the entire place was staring at you. They were practically coming out of the kitchen, and I think the 101st Airborne made an airdrop in the parking lot just to catch a glimpse of you." Terri playfully threatened, "Okay, Mr. Walker, you have 10 seconds to stop it," and she began to playfully swat at him, chasing him as he tried to avoid her, but he surprised her by catching her hand and pulling her close, as if he wanted a kiss. Instead, he takes her in his arms and starts to dance, and he sings to her, dancing in the dark, middle of the night, tacking your heart and holding it tight. emotional touching my skin and asking you to do what you've been doing all over again. Oh, it's a beautiful thing. Don't think I can keep it all, and I just have to let you know what it is that won't let me go. It's your love. It just does something to me. It sends a shock right through me. I can't get enough, and if you wonder about the spell I'm under, it's your love. As they swayed to the slow rhythm of the music, Terri held Michael close, her head resting on his shoulder. She whispered softly, when I return to our world, I'm going to have to buy that Tim McGraw a song. I want to relive this moment every night when I'm feeling lonely, and I'll think of you, Mr. Walker. Michael moves his hand from her back, brings it around, and lifts up her chin to face him, and he says, what makes you think you'll be lonely when we return to our world? With a hint of moisture in her eyes, Terri softly murmurs to Michael, I don't want to return. I want to stay here in this world with you. I'm just a simple girl, Terri begins to say, but Michael interrupts her abruptly. He quips, wait a second, girl, stop right there. When were you ever a simple girl? Maybe back when we were in Missouri, or when we were strolling through that cemetery, and you had dirt all over your face, Michael reminisces. Terri snaps out of her reverie, puzzled, and asks, what? I didn't have dirt all over my face. Michael grins and playfully retorts, oh yes, you did. Your little nose was covered in dirt. Why didn't you tell me? You let yourself go around with dirt on your nose all afternoon. As Terry's fringing anger, Michael continues, I thought you looked cute, and when we stopped at Stucky's back in Missouri for lunch, didn't you notice everyone staring at you and laughing? You were the one they were pointing at, and you thought they were laughing at the humorous signs on the wall. Michael laughs, and Terri teases, you have 10 seconds, Mr. Walker, and 9 of them are already gone. Michael offers his hand with a gentle smile and says, Miss Terri, may I have the pleasure of dancing with you? We may not have any music, but my dear lady, we don't need music when you're in the embrace with the love of your life before you. Lean your head upon my shoulder and let's create our own melody in our mind. As they dance, they hold each other closely, lost in their own images in a rhythm of love. The train conductor, positioned on the entrance steps, gazes down at the couple and remarks, I hate to interrupt your romantic moment, but this train is departing in just 2 minutes, whether you lovebirds are on board or not. I suggest you make your way inside. Michael and Terri abruptly came to their senses, recognizing their surroundings. They hurriedly boarded the train and made their way down the narrow Alta seating area with plush cushion seats. I suppose you'd like the window seat, Michael suggested. Yes, if you don't mind, Terri replied. As they settled into their seats, the conductor's voice came over the intercom, announcing, our next stop is Hannibal, Missouri, and we should arrive there around 9 in the morning. Terri leaned her head on Michael's shoulder and whispered, you have the best shoulder in town. I've never in my life felt as safe as I do with you, Terri confided. Michael gazed into her eyes and softly whispered into her ear, I was just about to say the same thing to you. Terri playfully gave him a gentle tap on his chest before drifting off to sleep. She was stirred from her slumber when she heard Michael coughing. Concerned, she asked, are you feeling okay? Do you think you might be coming down with something? Well, I don't know, he replied. Terri insisted, we'll see a doctor when we reach Hannibal. No, I don't need a doctor, Terri, Michael protested. But she was determined, saying, yes, you do. I want to make sure you're not coming down with cholera or that water you drank had a foul smell to it. Upon their arrival in Hannibal, Terri approached the clerk at the ticket sales window and inquired about the location of a doctor. The clerk replied, well, we do have a part-time doctor and blacksmith up on the south side of First Street. His name is Dr. Payne. Terri seized Michael's jacket and pulled him along toward First Street. Come on, Michael, she urged. All right, Michael relented. I can do this myself. He entered the blacksmith's shop and spotted a man meticulously sharpening an axe and a couple of hatchets to razor-sharp precision. With a puzzled look, Michael approached the smithy and asked, I'm looking for Dr. Payne, spelling out the word Payne just to be clear. The smithy, still focused on his work, responded, that's me. Just give me a minute. I need to get this axe so Shark the barber can use it to shave his customers. All right, the smithy said, wiping his hands clean. You can step into my doctor's office. Terri motioned for the doctor to join her and voiced her concern that Michael might have cholera. They conversed for a few minutes, during which the doctor alternated between glancing at his office, where Michael waited, and nodding thoughtfully back at Terri. After what felt like 5 minutes, the doctor entered his office, carrying one of the razor-sharp hatchets in his hand. He placed it on his table and proceeded to examine Michael while asking questions. Finally, the doctor remarked, I think you're okay. It's possible you experienced something in the air while you were traveling. Then, he added, would you please remove your trousers? Uncertain but complying, Michael removed his trousers. At that moment, the doctor picked up the axe and humorously commented, your wife mentioned you also wanted a vasectomy. Michael jumped from the table, hastily pulling his pants up, and glanced out the window. He saw Terri shrugging her shoulders and raising her palms with a mischievous smile. "How much do I owe you, doctor?" Michael asked. "2 bits," the doctor replied. Then he laughed and added, "Are you sure you don't want that vasectomy? I have a good sharp axe here, and it would be over and done in just a second. I would think about it, sir, considering how set she seems set on you getting one," said the doctor. Michael quipped, "Or doctor, her 50 cents. By the way, doctor, do you happen to make female coffins?" Michael crossed the street while Terri indulged in some window shopping. She turned around as he approached, giving him an assessing look from head to toe. With a playful grin, she remarked, "Looks like you may have had some fun. So, babe, what do we have planned for today?" It took Michael a moment before he answered, "Well, this is the home of Samuel Clemens, and in 20 years, he's going to write the book at Tom Sawyer. There's also a McDougal Cave just south of here. In my time, it was a minor tourist stop. How about we drive down there early and write our names on the rocks inside before anyone else?" Michael then purchased 2 lanterns and a ball of kite string. He also rented a buggy and driver to take them south of the city of Hannibal. Upon arriving at the cave, they noticed a sign out front warning people about getting lost inside. Terri teased Michael, "Are you planning to scare me in this cave like I did with you this morning?" Michael chuckled and assured her, "No, I'm not, but I do owe you one. I just wanted to enter the cave and find this huge rock where we could carve our names on it. When I was last here in 2020, there was a gift shop in front and guided tours. As we descended into the cave, the tour guide mentioned that after Mark Twain wrote about this cave in his books, millions of people came here to see it. Back then, they would carve their initials on the huge flat stone inside. With lanterns casting a soft glow and string laid down as a guide, Terri and Michael made their way back to that stone. Michael carefully carved into the rock, "Michael loves Terri." Now to the readers of this story. If you visit that cave today and look for it, you'll find a carving that says Michael loves Teresa, and below it, off to the right, it says at 20 years, and Teresa still loves Michael. Terri is a short for Teresa. Look for it, and you will find it. As they emerged from the cave, Terri gently took hold of Michael's sleeve and remarked, "I was certain you were going to try to scare me, but you didn't. You simply wanted to leave behind a historical memory that we were here. Perhaps one day you'll return with one of your granddaughters, point to our names, and tell her that was a man who once loved you. Michael, I'm sorry for playing that prank on you. I wish I hadn't. I apologize." In a casual tone, Michael responded, "You're only saying that so I won't get you back." Terri paused for a moment and then replied with a playful grin, "Probably so, but it was so much fun to watch you." During their leisurely buggy ride back to Hannibal, the gentle sway of the carriage providing a soothing backdrop, Terri spoke candidly, her words flowing like a gentle stream. "When I first met you," she began, her gaze drifting toward the picturesque scenery passing by, "I simply saw an older gentleman with a kind soul. It never once crossed my mind that I would eventually find myself falling head over heels." As the wheels of the buggy turned, Terri's voice carried the weight of her emotions, and the air seemed to hold a certain serenity. She continued, "Life has this remarkable way of surprising us, doesn't it? It's like a beautifully scripted story, full of unexpected twists and turns. And in this story of ours, I found a love so profound and unexpected that it has forever changed the way I view the world. Being with you," Terri began, her voice carrying a sense of wonder, "feels like being a little girl on Christmas morning once again, sitting beneath a beautifully adorned tree surrounded by dozens of gifts. With each gift I open, there's that incredible anticipation, that sense of not knowing what I'm going to find. And as I travel through life with you, I see a remarkable similarity." She continues, her eyes reflecting the joy of this comparison. "Every moment with you is like unwrapping a new, precious gift. I never quite know what's in store, but I'm excited to discover it, to experience the beauty and wonder you bring into my life." Terri leaned in front of Michael and planted a tender kiss on his lips. The coachman, steering the buggy, couldn't help but notice the affectionate exchange and jokingly remarked, "So, do we need to stop and get you to a room?" Without missing a beat, Terri responded with enthusiasm, "Yes." Michael laughed heartily and drew Terri even closer, reassuring the driver, "No need for that. She's just having a romantic female reaction. Please carry on to the city." Terri took her hand and hit Michael's chest. "So now that the moment has passed, what is our plans now, sir?" "I think we need to go south to the Walker farm and leave this money we got from Cole Younger with my great-grandmother's brother." The next morning they were on the train again going south to Perryville, Missouri. As they arrived in the city of St. Charles, they were faced with the need to change trains due to a difference in track gauge. Michael instructed the porter to transfer their 2 bags to the other train going south to Perryville, while he personally escorted Terri. However, as they made their way through the train car, a figure emerged from the shadows, striking Michael forcefully on the head. Terry's piercing scream echoed, "Michael, Michael." 10 minutes later, Michael regained consciousness to find a police officer standing over him, his head throbbing from the blow. He inquired urgently, "What happened to Terry? Where's Terry?" The policeman seemed puzzled. "Who's Terry?" he asked. "The lady who was accompanying me," Michael replied anxiously. "I didn't see any woman around when we found you. I believe someone attacked you, hit you over the head, and robbed you." Michael rose to his feet, reaching into his pocket to check if his money was still intact. He continued to inquire if anyone had seen the woman he had been traveling with. In his pocket, he discovered a note that ominously read, "If you want to see your wife again, bring $200 in gold to Halls Ferry Road and Chamber in St. Louis. Come to Brewer's Saloon and see him before 5 tomorrow evening. If you contact the police, we'll know, and we'll cut her throat and throw her body by the side of the road." Curious, the policeman inquired, "What's in the note?" Michael quickly responded, "Oh, it's nothing but a shopping list my wife gave me. If someone robbed me, they only got a few dollars, so it's not a big deal. Let me get out of here. Porter, porter," he called, "leave my bags on the train. I'm heading into St. Louis." The porter acknowledged, "Yes, sir." The policeman allowed Michael to continue his journey into St. Louis, asking again who was Terry, and Michael said to the policeman, "I was confused. I thought my wife was with me." Upon the train's arrival at St. Louis Union Station, Michael summoned a porter to gather his belongings and load them onto a carriage. He then instructed the coachman to transport him to the St. Louis Mercantile Bank. The young paperboy nodded knowingly. "I know someone who can take you out there." "Follow me," he said as he tossed the remainder of his newspapers into a nearby trash bin. Michael swiftly grabbed his 2 suitcases and followed the boy. They went through a couple of side streets until they reached the boy's home. "I live here, and my dad can take you," the boy explained. "He's heading out to the Pezzle farm this morning to pick up a load of corn, and that's not too far from where you want to go. By the way, sir," he added cautiously, "you should consider taking a gun with you. It can be a dangerous place at night if you plan on staying there." Within an hour, the boy's father had hitched his wagon to 2 horses and invited Michael to climb on board. The boy's family kindly agreed to look after Michael's 2 suitcases. As they began their journey, the driver asked Michael if he had business with the Brewer family, cautioning that they could be rather shady when it came to financial matters. After driving a few miles, they came to a stop. The driver explained, "My mother lives in this house, and she asked me to hang a mirror on a dresser that had fallen. This was the first chance I've had to do it." Curious about the location, Michael inquired, "What's the name of this area we're in?" "It's called Baden," the driver replied. He tied the horse to a nearby tree, and Michael entered a nearby dry goods shop. There, he purchased a box of Prince Albert cigars, and, after paying, he placed the cigars in his coat pocket and discreetly placed $200 in gold coins into the cigar box along with Terry loaded 2-shot Derringer, concealing it with a small handkerchief on top. Shortly afterward, they resumed their journey. On arriving at the bank, Michael requested the coachman to wait for him. However, the coachman regretfully informed him that he needed to return to the station to assist other passengers. Consequently, Michael's belongings were unloaded onto the street in front of the bank. As he assessed the situation, Michael spotted a young boy selling newspapers nearby. He approached the boy and offered him $5 to keep an eye on his baggage while he conducted his business at the bank. He promised to give the boy an additional $5 upon his return. The boy eagerly agreed to the arrangement. Michael entered the bank, found that manager, and deposited $38,900 into a savings account. Additionally, he requested $1,200 in various gold coins to be placed in a bag for him. Leaving the bank, Michael returned to the bustling city streets in search of a taxi. Hailing one, he addressed the driver, saying, "I need a ride out to a place called Brewer Tavern at Halls Ferry and Chambers Road." The driver regretfully replied, "I'm sorry, but I don't venture out that far from the city. It's quite a dangerous area, and I doubt you'll find anyone willing to take you there." It took them nearly an hour to navigate the challenging road with the empty wagon bouncing about. Their first stop was at the Pezzle farm, where they began loading the wagon with corn. As Michael glanced to the left, he noticed the significant presence of Yankee soldiers camping on the farm adjacent to the Pezzle property. Memories from his childhood flooded back to him, envisioning his family's home standing there a century from now. He recalled his father using a wheelbarrow to transport dirt from that very area to fill in a section of their garden. It was the same dirt that had come from the camp of those soldiers. His father had come home one day, excitedly sharing the discovery of numerous large pennies and a couple of rusted Yankee bayonets. It was all beginning to make sense to Michael. Once the wagon was fully loaded, the ride became much smoother as they traveled the half-mile distance to the crossroads of Chamber and Halls Ferry. The driver pointed towards the brewer saloon and mentioned, "There's a brothel on the second floor." Michael nodded, reminiscing. "Yes, I remember. They still called it a red light district back in 1963. The driver raised an eyebrow. 1963? You mean 1853, right? Yes, my mistake, Michael said, correcting himself. Yes, that's what I meant, 1853. I'd be willing to pay you double your normal fee if you'll wait for me. I have to deliver a package of cigars to Mr. Brewer at the tavern, and I also need to pick up a package," Michael proposed. "Sure, I'll wait for you, but I'll be across the street at the livery stable, checking on my wheels," the driver replied. As he left, his parting words held a note of caution. "Be careful of Mr. Brewer, he can be a dangerous man." With a nod of acknowledgment, Michael entered the saloon, and all eyes turned toward him. He was dressed in sharp Eastern attire, meticulously groomed, whereas everyone else in the establishment appeared to be farmers in tattered farm clothes. The bartender, in a gruff manner, inquired, "What are you drinking? Tin Horn?" "The beer will be fine," Michael replied. Once the beer was delivered, Michael decided to initiate a conversation, saying, "I'm looking for a Mr. Brewer. I believe I met some of his associates on a train in St. Charles, Missouri." The bartender gave a subtle nod of his head and responded, "I'm Brewer." Simultaneously, two men seized Michael and held him in place while another man frisked him, searching for a weapon. The patrons quickly exited the saloon, and one man shut and locked the door. During the search, it discovered two brand-new Colt .45 pistols on Michael, placing them at his back. "So, did you bring me my money, Tin Horn?" Mr. Brewer inquired sternly. "Yes, sir, I did, and it's in the cigar box right here in front of me. But before I give you anything, I want to see the woman now, and you'd better pray she hasn't been treated indecently or harmed," Michael retorted firmly. Mr. Brewer chuckled and reached for the cigar box, but Michael swiftly opened it and aimed the firearm at Mr. Brewer's head. Brewer's laughter ceased as he said, "I have 3 men behind you, and all it takes is a nod from me, and you'll be dead." "Maybe so," Michael replied calmly, "but you'll be the first to go. Sir, I have no qualms about ending your life. In my first war, I accumulated 4 times the number of kills Henry McCarty was credited with." The bartender, intrigued, asked, "Who's Henry McCarty?" Michael grinned and responded, "Billy the Kid. If you survive this day, you'll read about him in the papers. Sir, you have 10 seconds to produce her, and 9 of them are gone, and you will be too," Michael warned as he raised the gun, aiming it directly between the bartender's eyes. Okay, the bartender quickly conceded, "You win, but I don't have the girl. They took her on the train heading to St. Joe, Missouri. They're planning to place her in a brothel." Michael reached out and pulled the bartender's head closer to him, keeping the derringer pointed directly between his eyes. "Have your men lay my .45 on the bar beside me," he instructed. Then walked onto the far end and unlocked the front door. As the door was unlocked, a group of farmers had gathered outside, listening intently to the conversation within. As the door swung open, they stepped aside. Michael picked up his guns and cigar box, turning and walking toward the door backward, with one .45 pointed at Brewer and his men. "Gentlemen," he addressed the onlookers, "I have a Sharps .45 .70 sniper rifle in the wagon outside. If you attempt to follow us, I can still remove a man's head at 1,000 yards and relish the sight of the beautiful pink mist that emerges from where his head once was. Think about that before you decide to follow us." Everyone froze as Michael exited the saloon and then climbed on the wagon, and they headed off down Hulls Ferry Road. "What happened in there?" the driver asked. Michael turns and says, "They didn't like my cigars." Upon returning to St. Louis, Michael swiftly gathered his luggage and boarded the next train bound for St. Joseph, Missouri. He learned that a train left St. Louis for St. Joseph every day at the same time, so Terri couldn't be more than 24 hours ahead of him. The train journey took them across the Missouri River and into the town of Wentzville. During a telegraph announcement, it was revealed that the train that had departed yesterday had been intercepted by robbers somewhere west of Columbia, Missouri. The train's engine had been destroyed, and all the cars had been set ablaze. This meant they would have to wait in Wentzville until the wreckage was cleared from the tracks. Anxious about Terri's safety, Michael paced back and forth in the train station's waiting room. A sympathetic conductor suggested, "Why not hire a horse and buggy and explore the city? It's quite beautiful this time of year." Taking the advice, Michael rented a horse and buggy with a driver, imagining he would travel to the place of his future home, the Yellow Rose, as it was in 2023. It would take only 30 minutes to reach the location. As they drove, with Michael providing directions, the driver mentioned that he knew the area well, as his family, the Hoffs, lived nearby. The rolling hills and farmland were especially picturesque during this season. Following Michael's directions, they arrived at the site where his future street would be. There, they unexpectedly came upon A log cabin engulfed in flames. Stopping at the house, Michael spotted a young girl in a white gown amidst the smoke. Rushing to her side, he asked if she was okay, and she coughed from the smoke. She informed him that her 2 younger brothers and father had succumbed to cholera, and she and her mother had contracted the disease as well. Her mother had set fire to the house and planned to leave the area but was consumed by the flames. As Michael held the trembling girl in his arms, he reassured her that he was here to save her, sent by God for that very purpose. He instructed the driver to bring water, and he used his shirt as a makeshift rag to wash and cool her face. She revealed that her family was buried not far down the road near the frame-out house, which she identified as her aunt's residence. Michael knew the place, high up on a hill, but he firmly told the girl that they wouldn't be going there. He pledged to take care of her and adopt her as his daughter. He promised her a pony and the most beautiful dress money could buy from New York. Tears streamed down Michael's face as he held her close, their tears mingling, and he whispered comforting words to her. "You're going to be okay. I promise you, I'm going to take care of you, and you'll be all right," Michael repeated softly, his voice filled with conviction. He kept repeating his promises as the little girl looked up into his eyes and managed a faint smile. The driver brought the coach to transport the girl, but as he approached, he gently shook Michael's shoulder and said, "I'm sorry, sir, but she's gone now. You can't save her." No, tears streamed down Michael's face. He sat on the ground, cradling the lifeless girl, rocking her back and forth, unwilling to accept that she was gone. As Michael sat there, his mind raced forward to the year 2009 when he was building his home. Workers would ask him about the little girl in a long white gown. They claimed to have seen walking in the dirt where his basement was being dug. For months, different workers questioned him about the girl, but Michael always insisted that he had never seen her. However, as time passed, Michael's children would later claim that the house was haunted by a benevolent ghost who would manipulate lights, open and close doors. In the upstairs TV, they claimed they heard her at night sing nursery rhymes from the 2nd floor. Once when Michael had taken his children to the school bus stop on his property, he took a photo of his children. Later, when looking at the photo, that little girl was there with her arm around Michael Young's son's shoulder. Back in August 1863, neighbors appeared, dressed the girl and her mother, and laid the little girl to rest next to her father and siblings. Afterward, Michael returned to the burned-down house, dug a hole with a shovel near the rear and right side of the house, and carefully tucked $400 in gold coins in an old blanket and stuffed it all into an old kettle marked to Philadelphia Furnace Works 1840 and buried it. In August 2012, Michael would rediscover that pot and its contents, eventually selling it for hundreds of thousands of dollars over the next few years. As the late afternoon sun dipped toward the horizon, Michael returned to the train station just in time to catch the train loading for its westward journey to St. Joe. Passengers were abuzz with discussions about the latest news transmitted over the telegraph line. Michael settled into his seat, and a fellow passenger, a gentleman seated beside him, began recounting the story he had heard from the telegraph operator who was sharing it with the Wentzville Gazette newspaper. It appeared that the train had been forcibly halted by a group of raiders, possibly Quantrill's men. These raiders had boarded the train, singled out an unidentified woman with a distinctive red flower in her hat, robbed the passengers, and set the train ablaze. Astonishingly, the woman had ridden off with the raiders, as if she were part of their group. Michael couldn't contain his smile, his joy evident as he said out loud to himself, "There she is, and I was worried about her. They threw her to the wolves, and she came back leading the pack. I love that girl, and here I was worried about her. I think she can handle herself." As the train pulled into St. Joe, Michael attempted to gather more information, but no one seemed to have any additional details beyond what they had heard from the telegraph operator back in Wentzville. Determined to find Terri, he hired a horse and buggy with a driver to take him into town. The driver, thinking Michael was looking for some entertainment, dropped him off at a sporting bar. Michael paid the driver, and as he looked around, wondering if this was what a typical Western town looked like in 1863, it resembled a city of sin, with women hanging out of windows in scanty attire, or sometimes no clothes at all, and waving at him. He noticed numerous immigrants with their baggage loaded onto wagons, waiting for someone to guide them. He had heard that traveling west during this year was unsafe due to the scarcity of soldiers on the plains to defend settlers against Indian attacks. Determined to find Terri and remain together in this uncertain time, Michael walked into the establishment, immediately capturing the attention of most of the women on the first floor. 2 young girls approached him, wrapping their arms around him, and asked if he would buy 2 poor girls down on their luck. A whiskey. Michael allowed them to lead him to a table in the corner where they could talk. 3 whiskeys were delivered, and the girls downed them in one gulp, revealing that they were not whiskey at all, but tea made to look like it. It burned all the way down as Michael swallowed it. One of the girls, wearing an extremely low-cut dress and pointing provocatively at her navel, did most of the talking. "Honey, let's grab a couple of bottles and throw a party," she suggested. Michael nodded appreciatively. "The woman in question I'm looking for is my wife. Her name is Terri. She's about average height with blonde hair. The last time he saw her, she could have easily graced the pages of a fashion catalog." The two girls exchanged glances and burst into laughter in unison, remarking, "That sounds like every girl in this bar." One of the girls leaned in close to Michael's shoulder, allowing her breast to linger in front of Michael's face, and said, "Tell me what your Terry's like. I can be her, or I can be even better than she'll ever be. Besides, she'll never find out." "You're absolutely right, miss. I don't think she'd ever find out. She would never know," Michael replied, pausing for a moment before adding, "but I would. If you ladies can't help me, then please move on to the next table. I would offer a reward to anyone who could find her for me." From the saloon's second floor, there was a window in one of the rooms. The drapes were drawn shut, but a curious eye peered out from the corner, observing the activity below. Before long, the door to that room creaked open, revealing an older woman who bore the unmistakable marks of having spent too many years under the relentless sun. Her skin, once smooth and supple, now displayed a weathered texture with fine lines etched by countless sun-soaked days. A warm, bronze tan spoke of a lifetime spent outdoors, under the scorching sun's watchful eye. Her hair, once a lustrous hue, was gradually surrendering to the passage of time. Strands of gray had infiltrated the once vibrant locks, weaving a silvery tapestry amidst the remnants of her original color. It was as if the sun itself had kissed her hair, transforming it into a mosaic of gray and fading shades of her youth. Despite the visible effects of time and sun, there was an undeniable beauty in her seasoned features. Her eyes, weathered by experience, held a wisdom that only the years could bestow, and her smile, though lined with age, radiated a warmth that drew people in, making them wonder what stories had been etched into her sun-kissed skin and graying tresses. She wore a long gray buckskin skirt that appeared twice her actual size. A single six-shooter rested in a holster around her waist, and atop her head sat a Mexican-inspired cowboy hat. With measured steps, she descended the stairs, her gaze fixed on Michael, until she stood right in front of him. Peering down at Michael, she inquired if he was Michael Welker. "Why, yes," he replied, his tone polite, "but I don't believe we've had the pleasure of meeting before." "Although it appears you know me." With a knowing look, she responded, "I know you. I've heard a lot about you. I was told you might come searching for Terri Tyler." "Yes, I am," Michael affirmed, curiosity piqued. "Do you know her or where I might find her?" "Oh, no, I don't," she admitted, her expression cryptic. "But I suspect you might soon find yourself risking your life in the pursuit of her." "Perhaps," Michael replied confidently, "or perhaps many others would be risking their lives if they were to harm her in any way." The woman's hand rested on her holstered gun as she cast an assessing glance down at Michael. She then turned, speaking over her shoulder. "Would you like to follow me up to my room?" Michael chuckled at the proposition. If the young woman couldn't entice me into her bedroom, then the older woman is trying. "What's your name, ma'am?" As her foot touched the first step of the stairs, she responded with a hint of mystery. "They call me Bellstar." Michael lays $1 on the table, stands up, and follows the woman up the stairs. He enters the room, a modest and rustic space, reflecting the simple yet practical lifestyle of the era. As you entered, the creaking wooden floorboards beneath your boots echoed the passage of time. The walls were constructed from rough-hewn timber, giving the room a rugged and raw appearance. Flickering light from a kerosene lantern hanging on the wall cast dancing shadows, creating an ambience that felt both cozy and slightly mysterious. A sturdy four-poster bed dominated the center of the room. Its frame was made of solid oak, and the well-worn quilt on top bore a patchwork of colors, each square telling a story of its own. A feather mattress promised a comfortable night's rest after a long day on the frontier. Near the bed, a simple wooden writing desk was tucked against the wall, complete with a weathered wooden chair. A quill and inkwell stood at the ready for anyone wishing to jot down their thoughts or correspond with loved ones back east. A small window with lace curtains allowed in a modest amount of sunlight, revealing a view of the dusty main street outside. The curtains fluttered gently in the breeze, carrying with them the scent of sagebrush and the distant sounds of horses' hooves on the unpaved road. In one corner of the room, a popley stove stood sentinel, its iron exterior retaining the memory of countless fires. A stack of firewood was neatly piled nearby, ready to fend off the chill of the western nights. A wash basin and a pitcher of water rested on a wooden washstand, providing a rudimentary means of freshening up. The room held a sense of frontier charm, where comfort met the ruggedness of the untamed West, creating a haven for travelers seeking respite from their adventures on the frontier. "Please have a seat," she instructed, her tone firm, "but not on the bed. Who knows what kind of critters you might have on your clothes. Sit at the desk." Michael obliged, settling into the chair by the desk while she reclined on the bed and turned onto her side. I was over in Wentzville, heading west, she continued, when I noticed a woman being coerced into silence. One man claimed that Michael Walker was in the baggage car and warned her that if she caused a commotion, his life would be in jeopardy. She had the air of a strong woman, and if it hadn't been for the other two men, I think she might have stood a chance. She kept glancing back towards the rear of the train as if she expected this Michael Walker to come to her rescue. She told them, I have no control over Mr. Walker, but if he's not in the baggage car, I know he's in hot pursuit right now. Both men laughed at her. You won't be laughing when he gets here, she retorted. That's when one of the men slapped her across the face, confirming my suspicion that she was being forced into something. During our journey, I couldn't help but overhear her constant chatter about Michael Walker, her gaze perpetually fixed behind me as if he were about to materialize out of thin air. You know what I mean, said Miss Starr. It's like he's going to swoop in and rescue her, just like those tales you read in them dumb novels. I wasn't particularly fond of seeing a woman mistreated, but I figured it wasn't my place to intervene. So I simply observed as we traveled until we reached the other side of Columbia in Missouri. It was there that the train came to an unexpected halt, and a group led by Bill Quantrill and Bill Anderson began robbing everyone in our car. That woman you call Terri called out the name Jessie, and one of the robbers, who I believe went by the name Jesse James, engaged her in conversation. They seemed like kin, perhaps cousins or something of the sort. As Terri started to leave the train, the three men accompanying her protested, and one of them even drew his gun, seemingly intent on shooting them in the back. That's when I swiftly drew my own firearm and fired at all three of them. The woman glanced back at me, giving a sly wink, and Jesse tipped his hat in acknowledgement before they made a hasty retreat on horseback. Fortunately, the men I'd shot were only slightly wounded, and I told them they were fortunate, for if they'd raised a ruckus with Quantrill's men around, they might have wound up a lot worse off. In fact, she said he would hunt each one of you down. Look at what he did to those men over in Lawrence, Kansas just last week. For those not aware of the story that appeared in the paper on August 13, 1863, the Yankees arrested all female women and girls who were related to the raiders and who were defending their homes and families and shackled them to beds on the second floor of the Kansas City building. The second floor of the building had collapsed, killing 4 females and severely injuring many others. Later that day, a large group of Yankee soldiers were bragging about how they knocked out the center support holding the floor up. Bill Anderson's 14-year-old sister Jenny was killed, and then 8 days later Quantrill and his raiders sacked Lawrence, Kansas. Susan B. Anthony's brother was notorious for claiming he raped every female from 8 to 80 along the Missouri-Kansas border and many who were not Southern sympathizers. In the Lawrence, Kansas, during the raid, Daniel Anthony was searched for, but he ran off hiding in a cornfield wearing woman's clothing and fearing for his life, per Kansas City newspapers at the time. Belle rose from her seat and made her way to the door, which she promptly opened to allow Michael to exit. As he was about to depart, he inquired if Belle had any inkling of Terri's whereabouts. She conjectured that they might have headed south, tracing the Missouri-Kansas border, as they were staunch Southern sympathizers in that area. The Yankees have made that. A scorched earth down that way, then burned everything after running their wagon trains of stolen Southern furniture and property over into Kansas. Belle went on to add that if I had lost track of Terri back in Columbia then, I might consider retracing her steps to search for her there in that area. I'm at a loss, Michael, Belle admitted. Perhaps taking a horse is a viable option. I might do that, and who knows, maybe I'll come across Cole Younger after all. She's related to him. Terri's a clever woman, and she might assume that's where the trail ends, expecting me to search for her in that vicinity. Belle offered a word of caution, saying, if you're considering pursuing the Younger gang, exercise great care. They could easily confuse you for a Yankee Pinkerton, potentially endangering both of you. Michael acquired a horse and embarked on his journey back to Columbia, Missouri, making stops at each small town along the way. At every opportunity, he described Terri to the locals, hoping that someone might have seen her. While riding down the trail, he suddenly noticed a group of men who had a large black man tied up, and it appeared they were preparing to carry out a lynching. Hello there, Michael called out. I see you've apprehended a runaway slave. No, one of the men responded. We've caught him stealing my horse. Oh, Michael, that's a hanging offense. Michael was quick to inquire, is that the horse you stole? I'm in need of another horse. Is he for sale? The owner of the horse let the rope drop from the big black man's neck and asked, what would you give for him? Michael pondered for a moment and replied, I don't know. How about 200 in gold? After a brief exchange of money and a bill of sale, the transaction was completed. However, the men then suggested using Michael's horse to carry out the hanging. Michael questioned their intentions, asking, What did he do? Once again, he was told that the man had stolen a horse. Wait a second, Michael said, that's my horse, and he didn't steal my horse. Michael said, let's negotiate this where everyone comes out a winner. There are 5 of you gentlemen here. How about I give each of you $10 in gold, and you can all go into town and have some fun? Alternatively, I can keep my money, and you can proceed with hanging that man. After a brief discussion amongst themselves, the 5 men chose to accept the money and release the big black man, allowing him to go free. Michael instructed the big black man to mount the horse and follow along as they continued their journey down the road. During their ride, Michael inquired about the man's name, to which he replied, "They call me Big John." "Well, Big John," Michael began, "I need someone to watch my back. I'm on a mission to find a woman, and there is a chance we might encounter trouble along the way. If anyone asks about you, simply state that you're my body servant. Do you understand?" "Yes, sir, I understand," Big John affirmed. Michael then asked, "Are you familiar with handling a firearm?" To which Big John replied, "No, sir, I am not." In response, Michael reached into his belongings and handed Big John a Colt .45, instructing him to conceal it discreetly to avoid drawing any attention. Big John accepted the weapon, examining it briefly before casting a look up at Michael, who was riding ahead of him. "Now, Michael," he began, "you have a choice. You could shoot me in the back, steal my money, and ride away. But chances are you'll be caught, and soon enough you'll find yourself in the same dire situation you were in when I found you. Alternatively, you can conceal that gun, stick by my side, and together we'll watch each other's backs. You protect me, and I'll protect you." Big John discreetly stashed the gun in his pants, covering it with his shirt. As they continued down the road, Michael eventually stopped, dismounted, and tied their horses to a tree. It was there that Michael took the time to teach Big John how to handle the gun. They dedicated most of the afternoon to the lesson until they were nearly out of ammunition. Resuming their journey, they reached the next town where Michael purchased more ammunition, some descent clothes, and a fedora for Big John. Far from the city's eyes, they continued to practice shooting. "You're getting pretty skilled with that 6-shooter, Michael remarked. "In the next town, I'll buy you one just like it." Michael then turned to a different subject, asking, "Do you know how to read?" John replied, "No, I don't." "Well," Michael said, "I can teach you if you want to learn, John." Big John hesitated, expressing his concern. "Mr. Welker, there's a law against teaching us colored people how to read." Michael nodded knowingly and responded, "I'm sure there is, John, and there's also a law against teaching a black man how to shoot a gun." In the next town, Michael made a few essential purchases, including a couple of books, a small Bible, a bedroll, and a canteen for Big John. Late at night, as they gathered around a crackling campfire, Michael embarked on the task of teaching Big John to read and instilling in him the role Michael had in mind. With patience, Michael began his guidance, advising Big John, "Keep your head up, don't look down. There's nothing on the ground you need to concern yourself with. If someone approaches and engages in conversation, maintain your politeness. If someone seeks confrontation, it's best to remain silent. A simple 'I'm sorry you feel that way, sir, and I wish you a good day' will suffice. We don't want to get entangled in arguments, especially when we're outnumbered. It's wiser to stay silent until the odds are in our favor." In 1963 Missouri, a county road would typically be a narrow and unpaved route that meandered through rural landscapes. It was a single-lane, unpaved thoroughfare, often made of a little gravel but mostly dirt, which gave it a rugged and rustic charm. Tall, ancient trees flanked the road on both sides, their branches forming a canopy that provided intermittent shade on sunny days. Along the roadside, wildflowers and tall grasses swayed in the gentle breeze, painting the landscape with vibrant colors that changed with the seasons. Occasionally, a wooden fence marked the boundary between the road and the vast farmlands that stretched as far as the eye could see. The road's surface was uneven, bearing the marks of time and wear, with occasional potholes that made for a bumpy ride. In rainy weather, it could become muddy and slippery, posing challenges for travelers. The county roads were often quiet and peaceful, with minimal traffic. The occasional wagon or horse and rider would pass by, kicking up dust or mud as it went. Signs pointing to nearby towns were simple, hand-painted affairs, reflective of the slower pace of life. Michael discovered that Big John was a runaway slave who was born in Madison County, Kentucky, and taken over to Jefferson City and sold off. He was married, and in a heart-wrenching twist of fate, during an auction, Mr. Wills, one of the bidders, lacked the funds to purchase both Big John and his wife, Sarah. As a result, John was sold to a man from Jefferson City, Missouri. Big John, driven by the hope of reuniting with his beloved Sarah, managed to escape. He boarded a train, believing it would take him back to Jackson, Missouri, but soon realized he was headed in the wrong direction. He disembarked and found a horse, albeit briefly, as he was soon apprehended. Upon hearing the name Wills, Michael asked, "A man named Wills in Cape Girardeau purchased you?" Do you know if his name was Alberto Wills? Yes, Big John replied. That was his name. Do you work for him? No, I don't work for him, Michael clarified. I know of him. He has a small farm just east of the city of Jackson. I've heard he had a black woman working for him, and he must have treated her well because even after she gained her freedom, she continued to work for the family. Big John was taken aback by Michael's knowledge and inquired, How do you know all that, sir? You mentioned she's free already. Michael explained, Well, she'll be free soon, maybe after I find my partner, Terri. If Sarah is not already free, perhaps I can purchase her. Big John, if you remain loyal to me, I'll buy both you and her, and I'll ensure you that both of you will gain your freedom. I promise you that. Thank you, Mr. Walker, Big John expressed with genuine gratitude. At first, I wasn't so sure about you. You can't always trust what any man says to you. As they continued their journey along the winding road, their peaceful odyssey took an abrupt and unexpected detour. Just around a bend, they came face to face with a lone man on horseback. Sensing impending trouble, they brought their horses to a halt, but their caution was met with an alarming development. The man swiftly drew his gun and pointed it in their direction, his expression etched with suspicion and anger. He firmly declared that his horse had been stolen, and Big John was riding that very same horse. It soon became clear that the 5 men who had apprehended Big John for stealing a horse, and who had previously been intent on hanging him, had sold Michael a horse that rightfully belonged to someone else. The genuine owner had taken a train to Columbia, Missouri, and now stood before Michael, firmly believing that Michael was the horse thief. In a high-stakes, intense moment, Michael calmly attempted to explain the situation to the horse owner. He asserted that he had legitimately acquired the horse and was in the process of returning the slave to his rightful owner. In his defense, Michael presented the bill of sale for the horse as evidence. However, the horse owner remained unwavering in his claim to the horse, insisting that Michael had created his signature on the bill of sale and it was a forgery. If Michael were to face a trial, he would find himself confronted by 5 individuals accusing him of horse theft. To avert the legal proceedings, Michael chose to explain the situation as accurately as possible, recounting the events leading up to the present moment. In a bid to swiftly resolve the matter and avoid further complications, Michael made a generous offer to the horse owner. He proposed to pay 250 gold coins in exchange for the disputed horse, a proposition that would allow all parties to part ways amicably. After some consideration, the horse owner accepted the deal. With the matter resolved, Michael and Big John continued on their journey, resuming their quest. Upon reaching Columbia, John reached out to his bank in St. Louis, arranging for them to send an additional $1,000 to him. While in Columbia, Michael heard a rumor that the woman rode off a week before going to Perryville with 2 men who looked like the Younger brothers, and the Pinkerton men were in hot pursuit. Michael and John wasted no time after receiving the money and acquiring the necessary supplies. They embarked on their journey, eager to follow the trail. A few miles beyond the town of Perryville, they came upon a distressing scene. A horse and buggy had overturned, leaving 2 men and a woman seriously injured. Michael and John sprang into action, riding the overturned buggy and harnessing their horse to it. They proceeded to drive the injured trio into Perryville, where they were admitted to the hospital for medical care. While at the hospital, Michael had a conversation with one of the men who didn't require hospitalization. The man explained that they had been pursued by armed men who believed they were the Younger brothers. Fearing for their safety, the 3 individuals in the buggy had attempted to escape. Their flight had ended in disaster when the buggy flipped over. Eventually, the Pinkerton detectives realized their mistake and left the injured individuals behind, continuing their pursuit into Perryville. Michael walked into the bank in Perryville and initiated a transfer of all his funds from the St. Louis bank to the Perryville branch. After completing the financial transactions, he inquired about directions to the Louis Walker farm. Upon reaching the Walker farm, Michael introduced himself as Michael Walker and his manservant Big John, then explained that he was a distant cousin and a friend of Cole Younger. He revealed that Cole had entrusted him with a sum of money to be delivered to Louis's farm. In addition to this, Michael shared concerning news about his companion, a woman named Terri Tyler. He explained that she had been kidnapped in St. Charles but had managed to escape, and he believed she might have sought refuge at Louis's farm. Louis informed Michael that Terri had indeed arrived at the farm, but she was severely ill. It had been suggested that she should be taken to Cape Girardeau for medical assistance. Michael felt a surge of concern, unsure about the quality of medical care available in Cape Girardeau. He faced a difficult decision, whether to wait anxiously at the farm or to venture down to Cape Girardeau to ensure Terri received the best possible care. As Louis's wife graciously prepared dinner for Michael, who kindly requested if she could also prepare a similar meal for his loyal companion, Big John. She readily agreed, and the aroma of a hearty meal began to fill the kitchen. As he sat there, Michael's thoughts drifted, reflecting on his situation. He couldn't help but ponder how, in a different era, he might have had the power to bring about change. The notion of living in a different century crossed his mind, hinting at the desire for a world where he could make a greater impact. In 2017, a lady friend of his had a YouTube channel where she live-streamed her adventures in the Colorado mountains during the winter. She started in her broadcasts that she was trying to make her way back home due to a serious female-related health issue. Unfortunately, her car had slid off the road in the snow, and she became stuck in an unpopulated area of the Colorado mountains, this stranding her 8-year-old daughter, and her dog. She mentioned that she was roughly an hour's drive away from her city and anticipated having to tough it out until help arrived and worried it might take days. I messaged her while at the same time. I called a national helicopter in Englewood, Colorado. I asked for her exact location. I would arrange for a helicopter to pick them up and transport them back to Denver. As they waited in the freezing cold, her car eventually stopped running, and she feared they might not make it before help arrived. Fortunately, the assistance arrived in time to rescue them. She expressed her gratitude for the rescue, but that this happened in 2017, and I certainly didn't possess the same resources or capabilities now, in 1863. Louis suggested that I make the journey to Cape Girardeau Hospital, assuring me that if Terri returned in my absence, he would ensure she stayed at his house until my return. Big John and I prepared our horses and set out down the dusty road toward Cape Girardeau. As we rode, we happened upon the Hart Cemetery, a place I had visited only a few months earlier with Terri. There, amidst the peaceful surroundings, rested my great-grandmother, who had passed away just 4 years prior. A simple wooden white cross marked her final resting place, bearing her name across the top. I halted our journey momentarily, while without being told Big John had gathered some wildflowers to place by her side, my own tears joining the tribute, and they seemed without end. When I was ready to go, Big John came over to me and helped me rise. We continued our journey southward toward Appleton, an area where I knew my family once lived, although the exact location remained a mystery. As much as I longed to reunite with them, my primary focus remained on finding Terri. Crossing the old bridge at Apple Creek, we pressed on until we reached the hospital in Cape Girardeau. As I arrived at the hospital, I couldn't help but notice its stark resemblance to the one in Perryville where Big John and I had left my cousins. It was a simple, unassuming building with a reception desk positioned in the front. Then I rushed to Wentzville, where I heard that the train you were on had been robbed, and you were with a bunch of scoundrels at some dude ranch. As my narrative continued, I recounted my encounters. I crossed paths with a ghost, met Belle Starr, intervened in a lynching, and even found myself in the middle of a horse theft. Later, I narrowly escaped getting shot. I witnessed a carriage accident and helped the survivors, escorting them to the hospital. Along the way, I paid my respects at my grandmother's grave and drove through Cape, the last 2 miles in, a torrential downpour. I did all of that and a lot more, Miss Scarlett, just to rescue you. Well, Mr. Butler, isn't that what you were supposed to do? Rescue me. Then Terri gave me a little jab in the ribs, like for old time's sake. An hour passed, during which John acquired a new buggy and 2 horses to pull the carriage. With his own horse tethered to the back of the carriage and Big John riding alongside, they sought directions to Alberta Wills's farm. During our long journey to the farm, I happened upon an old oak tree that triggered a memory from my great-grandfather's Civil War journal. He had written about how his wife used to leave food in an old hollowed-out tree because there was often a scarcity of provisions in the Southern Army. As Big John led his horse toward a wooded area to fetch some water, I veered the carriage toward the tree, telling Terri about the tree in my grandfather's journal. To my astonishment, when I approached the tree, I discovered an old gray blanket covering, a basket with a loaf of bread and some baked goods inside. Inspired by the memory of my great-grandfather, I left $20 gold inside the basket and accompanied by a note that read, "From your great-grandson, John." August 2023, suddenly, I heard Terry's voice calling my name, "Michael, Michael." Startled, I turned to find 2 Yankees standing before me on their horses, their rifles pointed directly at me. One of the Yankees remarked, "Well, look what we have here. We've been watching this tree, knowing that some Johnny Reb would come along to get his grub, and now we've caught you. And it looks like we've got a beautiful lady as a bonus." One soldier nudged the other, suggesting, "I think we can have some fun with this one." Simultaneously, Big John had dismounted and positioned himself behind one of the soldiers, his Colt .45 pointed at the man's head. He warned them, "Both of you drop your rifles, or I'll be dumping your bodies in the creek behind me." The other soldier, panicking, turned around and fired a shot that narrowly missed Big John. In response, Big John swiftly dispatched him from his saddle. The remaining Yankee soldier attempted to flee on horseback, but Big John's expert marksmanship brought him down as well, leaving both soldiers dead in the dust. Michael handed Big John a pencil and paper, instructing him, write a note and leave it in the tree, informing whoever finds it that the Yankees are watching this tree and I'll take care of these two bodies. Terri chimed in, he knows how to write, to which Michael replied, he sure does now. Big John then stepped forward, determination in his eyes, and stated, I'll take care of those Yankees. I shot them, so it's my responsibility to handle them, and I say some words over their bodies as if they were real descent folk, but God will know the truth. Michael agreed, saying, well, okay, you write the note first. After that, let's move them over beyond the tree line and bury them later when we get a shovel. Those Yankee saddles and horses don't have any markings or brand on them, so we'll take them with us. Terri gently placed her hand on Michael's arm and asked him if he had to take many lives since she had last seen him. Michael, with a thoughtful expression, replied, no, I've been careful not to, just in case it could alter history. We're taking a chance with those two dead Yankees, but they were probably headed that way shortly anyway. Recalling an incident from his time on the train, Terri continued, when I was on the train, a woman shot 3 men who had kidnapped me. As I was leaving, Michael nodded in acknowledgement, saying, yes, I heard about that. Terri, that was Bellstar. She mentioned she didn't kill them, but made sure they would never have children. That was Bellstar, really, that was Bellstar, and I did get a chance to talk to her. Well, don't worry, Terri, if we see her again, I'll make sure and get her autograph for you. Terri allowed her eyes to roll into the back of her head. Terri laughed and remarked, could that have the same effect on history? Michael pondered her question and responded, I don't know, Terri. I suppose everything we do can potentially impact history. If we make it back to our world, and if it's not as densely populated as when we left, then I guess we'll find out. Their journey through time was laden with uncertainty, leaving them both with questions about the consequences of their actions. Michael, these were dangerous times. I never would have guessed it was so dangerous to have lived in the 1860s. Once the bodies had been hidden and out of sight, they continued, and Terri asked, where are we going? I told her I made a promise to Big John, and I wanted to keep my promise. As they approached the farmstead and pulled up to the small, elongated cabin, John conveyed his instructions to Big John to remain silent. After they knocked on the cabin's door, a young black woman cautiously answered. Michael signaled for her to remain silent, placing his finger to his lips, and then gestured toward Big John, who sat atop his horse. In response, the black woman discreetly placed her finger to her lips, her eyes alight with hidden joy at the sight of her husband. From the rear of the house, another woman's voice inquired, who is it? Sarah. With a calm demeanor and tears in her eyes, Sarah replied, telling her his name is Michael Walker, and he would like to speak to Mr. Wills. The man introduced himself as Michael Walker and expressed his desire to speak with Mr. Wills. The young girl, after checking the clock on the mantel, informed him that Mr. Wills was currently out in the field but would likely return around 6 p.m., which was about 2 hours from now. Michael thanked her and asked if she could point him in the direction of the field, to which she nodded towards Big John, who was standing nearby. She gave him a wave of her hand, and Big John raised his hand in acknowledgement. With Terri waiting in the carriage, Michael and Big John headed into a nearby cornfield. They approached a man operating a machine to harvest corn, taking care not to startle him, Mr. Wills. After introducing themselves, Michael presented a proposal to Mr. Wills. He explained that Big John was a runaway slave, and Sarah, Mr. Wills' housekeeper, was his wife. Big John wanted to stay with his family and was willing to work on Mr. Wills' property in exchange for his freedom, which Michael had enough gold to purchase. Michael believed that slavery would be abolished in 3 years, and during that time, Big John would work for Mr. Wills without pay unless his former master came looking for him along with a little extra for his problem. In such a case, Michael would provide the funds needed to buy Big John's freedom, and he would continue to work for Mr. Wills for 3 years. If no one came to reclaim him, Mr. Wills could keep half of the money, and the other half would go to Big John. However, it would be essential to keep Big John hidden from prying eyes to ensure his safety. Then what if slavery doesn't end in 3 years? Mr. Wills asked. Then you two are going to have to renegotiate the deal, but I think Sarah will be in this household at least 30 years. If the census records hold true. What does that mean? Mr. Wills asked, and Michael said it was just a feeling he had that she would remain on the farm until 1990 at least. Mr. Wills inquired, what if slavery doesn't end in 3 years? Michael contemplated for a moment before responding, in that case, you two will have to renegotiate the deal. However, my hunch is that Sarah will remain a part of this household for at least 30 years if the census records hold true. When Mr. Wills sought clarification, Michael simply explained that it was just a feeling he had, suggesting that Sarah might stay on the farm until at least 1890. An agreement was struck, sealed with a firm handshake, and Michael had a final conversation with Big John. He emphasized, "This is the only way to ensure that I can keep you two together and not have to worry about Sarah." Later that evening, with Big John's assistance, Michael buried the two Yankee soldiers. After the solemn task was completed, the two men shook hands again. Big John, with a curious look, inquired, "Where will you and Miss Terry be heading?" Big John asked. Michael replied, "I don't know for sure. Perhaps we'll stay in the area, or maybe we'll venture out west. I wish I could take both of you with me, but I can't, and I worry that I might change history and something might happen to you. I will tell you this just one thing: you're going to have a grandson, and he will make you so proud of him. His name will be known all over the world as Cassius Marcellus Clay, the greatest prize fighter the world has ever known." Terry and Michael found themselves back in Perryville, Missouri, on a quest to locate the wife of John's grandmother, Caroline. Michael had just shared a story about the Pinkertons pursuing 3 family members, leading to a buggy accident. He suggested they visit the hospital to check on the injured couple, who were all close cousins and bore a striking resemblance to Michael. Michael reminisced about meeting his great-aunt Lillian Wool-Smith back in 1979 while researching his family history. She had gifted him photos of her aunts, one of whom was named Missouri Belle. Michael was so taken with the name that 6 years later, when he had a daughter, he incorporated the name into his daughter's middle name. When his daughter turned 18, Michael compared her photo to the original Missouri Belle and was astonished to find their striking resemblance. When his daughter humorously questioned how her father had crafted her face in the clothing of 1880s attire, he said he didn't, but it appeared that they were twins. Curious about the well-being of the husband and wife from that accident, Michael inquired and learned that they had both been in a coma for nearly 2 weeks. There was hope that the woman might recover, but the man's prognosis was grim due to the severity of the accident. As they prepared to depart, they heard a commotion from the room in the hospital where the couple was housed. To their shock, it appeared that the woman was emerging from her coma while the man's condition deteriorated. They rushed back to the room, their faces filled with horror, only to discover that the couple in the beds were none other than Terry and John. The hospital of 1863 had inexplicably transformed into a modern facility, leaving them bewildered and stunned by the uncanny turn of events. It was now 2023 in a Perryville hospital. Terry lay on a hospital bed, slowly regaining consciousness. She was met with the shocking news that she had been in an accident involving a deer and that both she and her companion, John Wills, had been in a coma all this time. The surreal revelation hit her like a tidal wave. But as the fog of the dream began to lift, she frantically inquired about Michael, only to be met with grim news. He was slipping away. Tears streamed down her face as Terry screamed in anguish, refusing to accept the impending loss. She struggled against the doctors and nurses trying to restrain her, her cries echoing in the sterile room. Her words were a jumbled mix of pleas, expressing her love, need, and desperation for John. She knelt by his bedside, beseeching a higher power to spare his life. Tears streamed down her face as she clutched his frail hand, her heart heavy with fear and despair. John lay motionless, his face pale, and his breathing shallow. It had been days since the accident that brought them here, and every passing moment felt like an eternity. "Please, John," Terry whispered, her voice quivering. "You have to fight to survive. You can't leave me alone. We need each other. Please, God, don't allow him to die." "Please," she leaned over, gently planting a soft kiss on his forehead and his lips, hoping that her love and desperation would somehow reach him. Memories of their time together flooded her mind. Their first date, their laughter, their dreams of a future together. They had built a life filled with love, and Terry couldn't bear the thought of losing it all. The rhythmic beeping of the monitors in the room seemed to mock her, a constant reminder of the fragility of life. Terry's tears fell onto John's still hand as if trying to win him back to consciousness. She recounted their plans for the future, the places they had dreamed of visiting, and the children they had hoped to have. They put her back on her bed and moved the 2 beds together. Terry remained unwavering by John's side. She spoke to him, recounting their love stories, sharing the news of the outside world, and begging him to come back to her. She knew that the battle was within him, that he had to find the strength to overcome this ordeal. As Terry continued to pour her heart out, a glimmer of hope began to emerge. John's fingers twitched ever so slightly, a sign that perhaps, deep within the depths of his unconscious mind, he heard her pleas. With renewed determination, Terry held on to that flicker of hope, knowing that love and the will to survive could work miracles. She whispered once more, "I need you, John. Please come back to me. I love you, John, I know. I never told you before, and now I wish I had." John's eyes opened and his gaze met her. He whispered as she drew her face next to his, and he said, "Let's go back to Gettysburg." She said, "Yes, yes, my love, I want to be with you," as her tears flowed onto his cheek as her trembling hands wiped away her tears from his face. "I'm sorry, Miss Tyler, the doctor said he's gone." Her scream note could be heard on the floor below as she collapsed onto the floor, her world shattered. She began beating on the floor, pleading with God to please allow him to live. This was a mistake. He was really still alive. Gently lifted her back onto the bed, but her heart and spirit were broken. In her final moments, Terri longed to return to the dreamlike state of the coma, yearning to be with John. She had spent her entire life searching for a man like him, and now that she had found him, he was gone. An hour later, when the doctor returned, he sadly confirmed that Terri had passed away too, somewhere in the realm beyond. Amidst the clouds, Terri and Michael rode off in a buggy, sharing laughter as she playfully jabbed him in the ribs on their way to Gettysburg. Their spirits reunited, finding solace and happiness in being together once more. The end. By Terri Tyler and John Wells, September 25, 2023.